Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel and welcome to my Omnibus series. I've got so many of these omnibuses that are going to come out so that you'll be able to listen to an hour's worth of stories, which I know you're going to love. You know, the thing is that telling stories is such a fine art, and it's something that was practiced hundreds of years ago when people didn't have the technology that we have today. And everyone would gather around the fire and listen to a wonderful story. And also, what is so wonderful about a story is that personally, I think it is the best way to go to sleep. Every night when I go to bed, I always listen to stories. And that's something that parents used to do with their children. It's something that they still do with their children. There's nothing better than a good story. And so I hope you're going to enjoy this series. And before we start, I just want to say, do subscribe to my channel because you don't want to miss out on anything. Because I'm in for the long haul and I want to make sure that you get the most stunning stories to go to bed with at night or to listen to when you want to be one of those people sitting beside the fire and listening. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and let's get started. I hope you're going to enjoy the omnibus.
Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners. It was raining cats and dogs outside our home in Portland. The old house had been converted into several separate houses, possibly so the landlord could maximise the amount of money he made from his rental property. The house had about 6 separate homeowners. There was a sizable carport in the front yard for everyone to park their cars, and we all had our own front doors and small apartments. I found the stark white building, with its flat roof, looked rather sterile and clinical looking. It almost was like a large ablutions block, only not quite so bad. But let's just say, pretty it certainly was not. I suppose you can't have everything, but what we did have was a sizable backyard, with a wood grove that stretched back for miles, and so that was a big plus, which significantly made up for the shortfalls of our home. It was rumoured that Mr. Tarantino, who owned the property we rented, was going to build another one of these ghastly square buildings to accommodate more people, so he could maximise the benefits of charging even more rent. Mr. Tarantino was not efficient. He was the kind of person who would tell you he was going to do this and to do that, but he never got around to doing anything. So we all crossed our fingers and toes that his lackadaisical approach would stall any building developments in the foreseeable future. And so far, his inability to getting anything done had served us very well. My parents regretfully lacked imagination and creative flair, so our uninspiring house was possibly as nondescript, uncreative, and pedestrian on the outside as it was on the inside. It may have not mattered to my mother at all, but I remember it bothered me a lot growing up. As in my creative mind, I believed a home was meant to be beautiful. If I hadn't been a creative child and had been pragmatically practical, it probably wouldn't have troubled me a jot. My mother just threw drab, mismatched, monotonous-looking furniture together around our home and probably prayed to the gods that it would actually work out, without considering whether it would actually coordinate or not. She bought mediocre, bog-standard stuff cheaply from second-hand stores, selecting heavy, cumbersome, wishy-washy, monotone, dark pieces of furniture that looked so ungainly, prosaic and colourless in our home. It was a little like putting an ugly-looking can of baked beans to play central stage in a pretty doll's house. It was like nothing worked in our home, and that was the effect of my mother's decor. When we'd been invited next door to Marjorie Crocker's house for tea, I had an epiphany. And that was that not everybody's apartment was actually stodgy and unexciting, like ours was, even when they didn't have a lot of money. There was room for change and improvement in our home, if it was initiated, that was. Marjorie was a delightful, charming 70-year-old woman who had successfully transformed her apartment into a charismatic palace. Rooms were painted in elaborate regal colours, from vintage reds to greens and blues. Sumptuous furnishings were ornate, tasteful, comfortable but glamorous. Baroque chandeliers hung from the ceilings. And to my 8-year-old impressionable mind, she lived in a dreamy, fantastical fairy tale. I was completely beguiled and bewitched by her splendidly plush apartment, and would tirelessly, incessantly ask my mother why we couldn't make our apartment pretty like Mrs. Crocker's. "I want a princess apartment like Mrs. Crocker's. Did you see her lovely chandeliers, Mummy? Oh, I love her house. It's so pretty. Why can't our house be pretty like hers?" "Oh, for goodness sake, Cricket," my mother would chide. "A house is a house. Mrs. Crocker has gone overboard. Her house is so impractical. I mean, all her white furnishings and cream carpets are going to get filthy in no time at all. At least our dark furnishings hide the dirt very well." I knew there was no reasoning with my mother. Practical was her middle name, and she wore it like a badge of honour that she was proud to flaunt. My mother was a matronly-looking woman, with pillowy breasts, a stout figure, whom always wore clothes that reminded me of a headmistress at a school, from tweed jackets and skirts to sensible brogues. My father was her complete antithesis in every regard, a carefree person who wore his heart on his sleeve and never took life terribly seriously. I think the very thing that once attracted my mother to my father was actually tearing their relationship apart, as my mother soon began to tire of my father's nonchalant attitude, while he could not abide my mother's constant scolding, as well as the seriousness in which she took life. There was nothing carefree or jovial about my mother. "What do you mean by leaving your clothes lying on the floor, Grayson? How many times have I told you to stop being such a sloth? For goodness sake, you're a grown man, aren't you? Not a baby." My mother would henpeck my father, but my father would fight his corner and refuse to be bullied, so there was a great deal of tension in our home that you could cut with a knife. For the last few years, I knew something was off in my parents' relationship. They tried to hide it from us, but me and my brother Stephen, we weren't easily fobbed off. Besides, in our home the walls were so paper-thin, we could almost hear every word between the two of them. We had both noticed the glares my parents gave each other over the dinner table when they thought we weren't looking, and the way they avoided talking to each other. If they did speak to each other, it was cold, detached, and matter-of-fact. "If you could drop by the store, Grayson, buy some milk, I'd appreciate it, on your way home from work tonight," my mother would say. My father would respond, "Is there anything else you need?" "No, that'll be fine, dear." Never once was there any affection between the two of them, when my father might have given my mother an involuntary hug, or a kiss on the cheek. There was none of that. My brother and I shared a bunk bed with each other. He was on the top bunk, I was on the bottom, and I remember we would hear my mother saying, "Shh, the kids might hear." But they didn't know that even with their voices turned down low, we would hear every single word, and I do remember it caused us a great deal of distress. Well, more to the point, it caused me distress. My brother seemed capable of riding any storm, even when it was tempestuous, and he always landed on his feet. I was the one that was more sensitive, more emotional. "I'm tired of these charades, Cora. Really I am. I can't take it any more. The kids aren't stupid, you know. I'm sure they know what's really going on under their roof." "What are you saying, Grayson?" "I'm saying that I think we should get divorced. And at the very least, sharing a bedroom with your enemy is crazy. Nonsensical. We need more than a long line of pillows between us. I keep telling you, I'll be happy to sleep on the sofa if needs must. I don't enjoy sharing a room with you." "Don't be ridiculous, dear. You can't do that. What would the kids think? I keep telling you, Grayson, we can't get divorced while the kids are so young. Everybody knows children need stability in their lives. If we get divorced, it'll disrupt our home, cause chaos, emotional turmoil. As responsible parents, we can't do that to our children. It's not fair on them. Do you have any idea how many children get messed up because of their parents' divorce? Our children deserve better than that from us." "But I'm not happy, Cora. I haven't been for a very long time. I really want out. It's not working between us. Believe me, I've tried. Hundreds of people get divorced every year. They somehow make it work for their children. I can't abide living in this atmosphere, where you henpeck me all the time, as if I'm a little kid. No man deserves that." "Hundreds of people, Grayson, get divorced every year. You're right about that. But those hundreds of inconsiderate people cause hundreds of children to become seriously emotionally damaged. Do you want that to happen to our kids? Are you so self-centered, so self-absorbed, so selfish that all you can think about is yourself here? I don't enjoy living with you either. I have to grin and bear it. Sometimes I want to tear my hair out. I feel so frustrated. But do you see me complaining? No, you don't. I'm not such a wimp. I get on with things. And why? I have a responsibility to our children. You would do well to remember that, instead of whimpering all the time like a little baby. I'm not sure, Cora, that I can continue living like this. It's farcical. For goodness sake, Grayson, get a grip, will you? Stop whining. You need to get on with being a father to your children. Do you understand me? You have a responsibility of care to them. And yes, things may have irretrievably broken down between us. But if you love your kids, you'll bite the bullet and get on with life. How long do we have to continue living like this? Until the kids are 18. Are you kidding me, Cora? Cricket is only 8. I don't think I could stomach living with you for another 10 years. I'd rather put a bullet in my head, quite frankly. There you go again, Grayson, bringing all the drama back into this relationship of ours. I told you, I don't care a jot what you do outside this property. That's your business. You're a free man in that regard as far as I'm concerned. And the less said about that, the better. But under this roof, you remain my husband and my children's father. And you need to quit feeling sorry for yourself and get on with playing your dutiful role. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm not sure I do, Cora. I remember I'd looked at my brother, my eyes brimming with tears. Are Mummy and Daddy going to get divorced? Is Daddy going to put a bullet in his head? You heard them, says Stephen. They're going to continue playing happy families together. It's pathetic, as if we don't actually know what's going on. Do they really think we're that stupid? I wish to goodness sake they'd get a divorce, get over with it. No, Cricket, Dad is not going to put a bullet in his head. That's just an expression he's using. What's an expression? I asked. Don't you know anything, Cricket? Are you that stupid? Says my brother, sighing in exasperation. It means, Cricket, that Daddy says something that he doesn't mean, 'cause he's upset. Like I might say that I'd rather eat liver and onions than go to church on Sunday. What I'm really saying is that I hate going to church on Sunday so much that even eating liver and onions seems preferable. Do you understand what I'm saying? I didn't want my brother to think I was stupid, as he was giving me that exasperated, I can't believe you're that stupid kind of look. My brother was clever beyond his years, very bright, and patience was not exactly one of his virtues or strengths. I think he found my inability to comprehend things very frustrating. He was a straight-A student, a fast learner, very astute, and he sailed through math and science as if he was floating on air, which would make me insanely jealous. The teachers were considering putting my brother up 2 years, so he'd be studying with 12-year-olds, and he was only 10. But my mother wasn't having any of it. I think it would be in your interest, Mrs. Wagner, to put Stephen in a more challenging environment. He's a terribly bright boy, the headmistress had told her. I worry that your son is getting bored in class. He's finding the math and science far too easy. My mother had put her foot down and explained that she wanted her son to grow up with kids his own age and not to miss out on valuable years of his childhood. But, Mrs. Wagner, my mother had interrupted and piped, No buts, Mrs. O'Brien. I am Stephen's mother. I think I know what's best for my son, don't you? And I assure you jumping grades is certainly not in his best interests. You can't possibly expect a tadpole to hang around with bullfrogs, can you? Even if he is a clever tadpole, Mrs. O'Brien. I'm sorry, but I can't waste my time listening to you spout nonsense. If you must know, my parents did exactly the same thing to me. They put me in a class with kids 3 years older than myself, because I was so clever. I felt like a fish out of water, Mrs. O'Brien. The kids picked on me tirelessly. So no, you can't pop my son into a higher grade. He may be clever, but he's still immature. You teachers always think you have the answers to everything, but you don't. I'm sorry you feel that way, Mrs. Wagner. I really am. but maybe you would think on my suggestion a little. I personally think your son is wise beyond his years. He's a terribly bright, talented boy. I shan't be giving it any consideration, Mrs. O'Brien. The answer is unequivocally no. My son is staying exactly where he is, thank you very much. So now you can fully assimilate and appreciate why my brother Stephen found it virtually impossible to deduce why my grades were so abysmal at school, why I drudged along laboriously with my homework, bumping heads with my frustrations, as math numbers rose up in my head like angry wasps, stinging me tenaciously when I got it so horribly wrong, which was actually most of the time. When he did try to explain my math to me, his patience wore terribly thin. He looked like he'd explode with indignation. I decided it was more difficult to understand him than the math teacher herself, so I gave up asking him for help. I wisely concluded he was way too clever to come down to my vacuous, empty-headed level. Let's just say it genuinely stumped him to comprehend that I could find something he found so ridiculously easy, such a dreadful, arduous struggle. I can't cotton on to why you can't get it, Cricket. It's very straightforward, you know. Surely you're not that stupid. It's not a question of me being stupid, Stephen. It's your being way too clever. That's the problem, I'd tell him. It was on a Friday afternoon, and I remember it so well. It is indelibly marked on my mind. It was bucketing down with rain. It was a cosy feeling. I'd always loved the rain. I enjoyed watching it belting down onto our roof, splashing against the window. The sunlight had faded, as if the light had all but wilted away, almost as if it had been turned down at the electric socket, and there was a brisk, somewhat feisty wind blowing. I could see the tall Pacific pines, the Douglas firs and yews, in the distant woodgrove, beginning to swagger and sway, as the wind whistled through the trees and nudged their fragrant boughs, so they looked like they were dancing, while the rain dribbled down their needles, cloaking everything in its cleansing dew. All of a sudden we heard the cracks of thunder, and saw the jagged electric light of a lightning strike, bolting dramatically through the sky, like an arresting firework display on the 4th of July. It was simply marvellous to watch. I was in awe. My mother dashed into the house as quickly as she could. The wind slammed the front door behind her so loudly that I almost jumped out of my skin. My mother had left her umbrella at home and was drenched to the skin. Her wet clothes hung on her in limp rags. Her hair had become so dishevelled it was a tangled heap above her head, rather reminding me of a bird's nest, and her black mascara had dragged down her face in long grey tears. Oh dear, there was nothing on the weather forecast today about the weather turning like this. I better go and change. I'm soaked to the skin. As the English would say, 'tis fine weather for ducks today. What does that mean, Mummy? Ducks like water, don't they, sweetheart? So when it rains in England, they say 'tis fine weather for ducks. I noticed my mother's demeanour was sorrowful. Her normally straight deportment was slumped over like a crooked tree, and it was then that I sensed something was up, like a strange smell you can detect, but you're not quite sure what it is. It was at dinner that evening, when we were gathered around the table, as we did every night, when the choked, clawing atmosphere became quite sombre and gloomy, as if the crying weather out of doors had enveiled us in its sorrowful melancholia. It was still pouring outside. My mother would normally trill, "How was your day, Stephen? What did you do in math today? How was sports?" But for some reason, my mother's mouth was muzzled, her normal cheerful ebullience and twitter suppressed like a sorrowful songbird that had lost its desire to sing. Everybody ate in silence, and all you could hear was the tinkle of cutlery. My mother's desolate face looked like a barren wilderness, devoid of colour and hope. She was grimly focused on the scant offerings on her plate, studying her food so closely, as if looking at it under a microscope in a laboratory. She cut through her steak with a steak knife, but she never ate a single thing, but played with her food, as if drawing on her plate with vegetables. I became nervous, very unsettled. Something was terribly wrong. The energy was tense and taut, and for a moment I locked eyes with Stephen. He tried to give me a reassuring smile, but it didn't meet his eyes. My father remained very sombre. He ate quietly, chewing his food thoroughly, and not saying a single word. What the heck was going on? Why is everybody so quiet, Mummy? Is it 'cause it's raining outside? Is everybody sad 'cause it's raining? I like rain, Mummy. Sweetheart, we're just eating our meal. There's nothing wrong. But we normally talk when we eat. Everybody's so quiet tonight. If you must know, little cricket, said my father, me and your mother, we have something to discuss with the both of you. With you and your brother, that is. Grayson, do we need to discuss this now? Said my mother, who was grimacing. I mean, isn't there another time we could do this? No, there isn't. We're doing this now. My father straightened his back, rubbing his hand across the day-old stubble of his chin. He cleared his throat. Now, children, me and your mother have something very important we need to tell you. Things are going to change around here. I will be moving out of the house. Now, I don't want you both to get upset about this. Everything will stay the same in regards to the setup. You'll be able to visit me. I'll pop around to see you regularly. But I won't be staying in this house anymore. Your mother and I are getting a divorce. I burst into tears and began to sob. Daddy, please don't go. Please don't leave us. Daddy, don't. Please don't. Look what you've done, Grayson. You've upset little Cricket, chided my mother. I told you this would happen, but of course you wouldn't listen, would you? Cricket, I told you. I'm not leaving you. I'm never leaving the two of you. But I'm not going to be living under the same roof with you. But that is all. Nothing will ever change. But why are you going? I don't understand. It's not fair. I know it's hard, Cricket, but remember when you were best friends with Laura Douglas. Do you remember that? She's not my best friend anymore 'cause she stuck her tongue out at me and pulled my hair. Amy's my best friend now 'cause she's nice to me. Amy would never stick her tongue out at me. Well, that's right, Cricket. Amy is your best friend because she's nice. She would never stick her tongue out at you, as you rightly say. Your mother used to be my best friend. We were both best friends. That's why we got married. But we're not best friends anymore. We're not nice to each other like we used to be. So that's why I'm moving out. We don't like each other as much as we used to. So it's easier if we don't live together. You see, when we're together, we get angry and upset with each other. It isn't a good idea to always feel this way in your home. When Laura stuck her tongue out at you, you knew you didn't want to be her friend, did you not, Cricket? She was horrible to you. It's the same for me and your mummy. But Mummy doesn't pull your hair. She doesn't stick out her tongue at you. Mummy's always nice. No, Cricket, your mother doesn't. Your mother is nice, like you say. But you see, sometimes adults don't get along. And me and your mother are always upsetting each other. But why can't you be nice to each other? Then everything will be perfect and you won't have to go away then. Why did it take you so long, Dad? Said Stephen sarcastically. We always knew that you had a lousy relationship, you and Mum. Come, Cricket, says my brother. We don't need to listen to any more of this. My brother takes me by the hand, and we went to the bedroom together. I heard my mother saying to my father, I told you, Grayson, this would distress the children. But would you listen? Of course not. You're far, far too selfish. When me and my brother closed the bedroom door behind us, my brother was actually crying. It was the first time I'd ever seen him cry. He took me in his arms and said, Cricket, it's going to be all right, I promise. Daddy isn't leaving us, really. We'll still see him. He's not going away, not like that. He'll still be around. Suffice to say, the very next day my father moved out. He packed a suitcase. We watched him get in his truck and drive away. He looked up at the house one more time, and I could see such a sorrowful melancholia wash over his face. I knew that leaving us was the hardest decision he'd ever had to make. He climbed into his truck quickly and drove away as fast as he possibly could, possibly because it was easier to get away quickly then leave weighed down by a heavy reluctance. I remember watching him from the front window, and my heart sank like a coin in a large ocean of water. It was like experiencing a death, as the routines and interactions within our home would never ever be the same again. The dynamics had shifted and changed. The clock of our lives had been reset. The routines of 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock and 8 o'clock were now completely different. They would never include our father. When my father left, I did cry. I cried so much there were no tears left within me, but I felt as if I had been abandoned. Inside my heart I felt like a barren wasteland that was aching for rain, thirsty for the green shoots of recovery, to bring colour to my inner desolation and despair. I began to believe that in some way me and my brother were responsible for my parents' fortuitous breakdown in their marriage. Me and my brother had seen photographs of my parents before they had had children, photographs that revealed a couple madly in love with each other. But after we came along, things had gone so terribly wrong. My mother tried to comfort us. She tried to be reassuring once my father had left, but I was completely devastated. I loved my father with all my heart. He was the one who always played with us in the backyard. He took us for ice cream and to the movies. And now our fun-loving parent was no longer an intimate part of our lives. Granted, we would see him again and again, sometimes stay over with him at his new apartment, but life was never going to be as it had been before. And not only did I grieve for my father, but for the old days and for the days to come that would be peppered with his absence. Soon after my father left, I would wake up in the morning to discover my pyjamas were soiled with dirt. There were leaves, bracken and grass all over my sheets. When I looked under my feet, they were filthy dirty, and I had mysterious scratches on my legs that I never remembered receiving. My mother would complain that my sheets and pyjamas were so soiled and so dirty, but I was as perturbed as she was as to why or how this could possibly be happening. I had not been playing out of doors, and I always enjoyed a bath before bedtime, so why were my pyjamas and bedding getting so filthy? None of these enigmatic events made any sense to me whatsoever, and they only began to happen after my father left our home. And for a while, even at 8 years old, I wet the bed several times, something that embarrassed me greatly. My mother would shake her head, throw the sheets into the washing machine and say, "Look what Grayson has done. I knew this would happen. Selfish, selfish man. He only ever thinks about himself." Stephen's account. I had known for a long time my parents' relationship was on the rocks. For as long as I can remember, there was not much love expressed between the two of them, no passing peck on the cheek or random hug. Indeed, my parents never touched each other affectionately, nor did they share a joke. For years, behind the paper-thin walls of our home, I would hear my parents relentlessly talk about getting divorced, but my mother was insistent that they would stay together for the benefit of me and my sister, even sharing the same bed together. It would irritate me profusely that they had absolutely no comprehension how both me and Cricket knew exactly what was going on. We were fully aware of their marital disputes. In many ways, I blamed my mother for the serendipitous breakdown of their relationship, as she henpecked my father so much. She would nag at him tirelessly about dropped clothes on the floor or failing to put the loo seat down. I'd often think, if it upsets you so much, Mother, put the loo seat down yourself and pick up the clothes, but for God's sake stop nagging. But when my mother got a bee in her bonnet about something, she wouldn't leave it alone. She would frenziedly attack it like bees buzzing around a sweet can of cola. My mother was inadvertently driving my father away. No one wants to hang around with a patronising, condescending bully, and I'm sorry that's exactly what my mother had become. If my mother had held her tongue tightly and bitten her lip and accepted some of my father's idiosyncrasies, things could have worked out terribly well between them. Let's just say when my father announced he was leaving, I didn't take it at all well. It came as a cruel, hard blow to me, a cold slap in the face, very brutal, even though I'd known in my gut all along that one day there would be too many cracks in the wall, that something would ultimately have to give, and then their relationship would come tumbling down like a building in throes of demolition. But when it actually did happen, I was not prepared for it at all. And for the first time in a long time, I cried and cried and cried. I soaked my sheets until they were so wet it was as if they came out of the washing machine. My sister Cricket was not taking my father's absence from our lives at all well. And so began the bedwetting and the sleepwalking. I knew that was the reason that she was waking up with dirty feet and sheets bespeckled with leaves and twigs. I knew if I told my mother that Cricket was sleepwalking, she'd do her absolute nut. My mother had a propensity to overreact, so there were some things I clandestinely hid from her for this very reason. I knew I had to do something to stop Cricket from sleepwalking. I'd seen her returning to bed one night, covered in leaves, and when I spoke to her, she was unresponsive, almost as if she was locked in a trance. One night I woke up spontaneously, and I knew at once my sister was not in the bedroom. My sister didn't snore, but I could usually hear her breathing, but not tonight. I leaned over the top bunk to look down on the lower bunk, and sure enough, she wasn't there. Her bunk was empty, and instinctively I felt unsettled. If I had been groggy and half asleep, the cobwebs were quickly wiped away by my grievous concern for her. I groaned because I suspected she was sleepwalking again, and judging by the muddy state of her pyjamas recently, I ascertained she was possibly wandering around the backyard. This was crazy. Supposing she came to harm, she could fall over, potentially walk into something, injure herself even. I've always been exceedingly protective of little Cricket, as my sister is a sensitive soul who takes things terribly seriously. It was a routine for us to sleep at night, with a curtain slightly ajar, so that if we got up in the middle of the night to answer a call of nature, the moonlight would filter through the curtains, so you wouldn't be stumbling around awkwardly in the darkness like a blind man. My sister, at 8 years old, was terribly frightened of the dark, so we always kept a light on in the landing. I climbed down the ladder of the top bunk and dashed over to my closet to retrieve my windbreaker and sneakers, which I put on over my pyjamas. I trudged down the staircase towards the kitchen, as my mother never kept that door locked. She was fastidious about many things, but would always fail to lock the kitchen door. Maybe she thought it was a self-locking mechanism. I'm sure that was actually the case. Of course, there is no sign of little Cricket anywhere, but when I glance out of the kitchen window, I can see her little figure wearing her white pyjamas, tottering towards the woodgrove. She looked so vulnerable, so tiny, and I began to panic. Are you kidding me? I immediately grab a torch, open the kitchen door, and run across the backyard towards the woodgrove. I'm not sure exactly what time it was. I would hedge a bet that it was between 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning. Fortunately, tonight is gracious to me. Believe me, there are gloomy, dingy nights out here, when it's pitch black outside, and intimidatingly menacing. But tonight is beautiful, almost magical, really. The temperature was perfect. The luminescent light of the full moon magnanimously lit up the backyard, in sweeping, soft, ethereal shadows, while the bright stars twinkled from the firmament like rhinestone jewels on a velvety evening gown. I hurried towards the woodgrove, surprised to see how damp the grass has become, as the morning dew has dappled everything in a silvery glaze. I can hear the sounds of crickets and frogs. Their cheerful chorus rings through my ears. I can't see my sister yet. Where did she go? I know calling out to someone when they're sleepwalking is probably not well advised. Then I see her, and I shrink behind the trees, as I've seen something so ambiguous, I'm not exactly sure what it is. So I surreptitiously take cover, switching off my torch so as not to draw any unwanted attention to myself. I need to see what's going on here. I can't make sense of any of it. At first I think my sister is standing with 2 bears, and that is not something you'd ever actually want to see in the cold light of the day, nor in the middle of the night at this ungodly time. I curse myself for not bringing a weapon of some kind with me. Is my sister in danger? My heart begins to pound violently in my chest as I contemplate what it is that I should do. I peer at my sister from behind the tree, and with the moonlight filtering through the trees, I realise the creatures she's standing with are not bears. They're Bigfoot. For a moment I'm so confounded by astonishment I almost hold my breath, as if I'm diving under the water. No, this can't be real. It just can't. I take another hard look, and I realise that they are Bigfoot. One is male, the other is female. Both are a similar height, at about 8.5 foot tall, but the male is significantly bigger in girth, stature, and muscular strength. I'd say he's 800 pounds, while she's probably 600 to 700 pounds, but the gargantuan size of these creatures just boggles my mind. I notice their faces appear remarkably human. The male's face is much more masculine, with a pronounced square jawline and high cheekbones. The female's is much more feminine, with an oval face shape and high cheekbones that some women would probably kill for. There's nothing hideous or ugly about their faces at all. On the contrary, I would describe them as really rather handsome. I would have expected to see primate influences to their appearance, but that was not the case, with the exception of their overlong arms. I couldn't see what colour their long flowing hair was, as the darkness can steal the colours away, that in the daytime you can see so clearly. But I would say they were a dark colour. Under the wispy subtle light of the moon, they appeared as dark as the trees. That's not really saying much, is it? The female Bigfoot has stopped my sister in her tracks, and is waving her hand in front of my sister's eyes. She's talking to the male Bigfoot in hushed whispers. I feel a huge measure of relief when I realise that they are non-aggressive and actually very concerned about my sister's welfare. The two creatures talk together earnestly, backwards and forwards, as they discuss what they should do to help her. They knew it wasn't good for her to be wandering around the place in a trance-like state. The female decides to try and wake up my sister, fearing for her safety, and begins to gently tap my sister to rouse her from her sleep. My sister opens her eyes, and on seeing the female Bigfoot, she screams. The Bigfoot tries to calm my sister down. She's so terrified, she races through the woodgrove back to the house as fast as her legs can carry her. I'm relieved she's awake now, but she must have had a hell of a shock. Imagine waking up to find this tall, hairy humanoid staring down at you. My sister is so easily freaked out. If there's a monster movie on television that scares her, she has to sleep with the light on all night. I watch the two Bigfoots engaging in long conversation together, and I sense the female Bigfoot is sad that my sister was scared of her. The male pats her on the back encouragingly, as if to say, "Never mind, don't let it get you down." In that moment I'm struck by their humanity. I walk over to them very confidently, and they turn around, startled to see me. "I'm sorry about my sister screaming. I guess she got a shock." The female Bigfoot looks at me through kind yellow eyes and nods. I'm almost certain she understood what I'm saying. It's like she read my thoughts. I say, "Thank you for helping her," and they watch me with inquisitive but bemused-looking eyes as I return home. When I get back, my sister is panicking. She's crying. "Stephen, I woke up in the woodgrove. This big black creature was shaking me. I was so scared." "It wasn't a big monster, sis. It was actually a female Bigfoot. She was really nice. Actually, to be precise, it was a male and female together. They were extremely worried about you, sis. They decided to wake you up from your sleep. Because it wasn't safe. You were walking around in the darkness, fast asleep, wandering around the woodgrove. They were earnestly discussing what to do to help you. But when you opened your eyes, you were terrified. But I promise you, they had no intention of harming you. Of that I'm certain. They wanted to help you." To cut a long story short, I decided to lock the bedroom at night so my sister would quit sleepwalking. But as soon as it started, it actually stopped. Let's just say within time, my sister and I learnt to adapt to the positive side of my parents' divorce. But when I got married myself, I learnt one lesson from my parents' marriage, and that was not to sweat the small stuff and to bite your lips if you want to reprimand your other half. And to date, me and my wife are happily married. But I reflect over the time I met those two Bigfoots, and I remember just how human they were, not much different to us at all. So there you are. That's my story.
Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, my husband was sitting in his habitual place, the comfortable upholstered chair, at the low wooden breakfast table, covered in a kaleidoscope of bright-coloured, thimble-sized Moroccan tiles, done in a mosaic of oranges, greens, blues, golds and reds, in our cheerful sunny yellow kitchen of the semi-detached home where we lived on a Sunday morning, enjoying his traditional Sunday breakfast that had never wavered, vacillated or changed, not once in the 15 long years of our marriage. Suffice to say, not even the fluctuating seasonal weather conditions could encourage or persuade my stubborn husband's discerning palate to welcome variety or change, as he was resolutely stubborn,
rigidly stuck in his ways, like a dead fly caught up in the honey pot. He was so traditional. Every Sunday it was hot, steamy croissants, served with rich clouds of butter and homemade strawberry jam, washed down with black coffee, with no cream or sugar. My husband liked his coffee very strong, claiming that the caffeine kick made his mind as sharp as a knife and his attention as alert as a police dog. On this beguiling June morning, the soft shafts of pretty morning light filtered through the kitchen, and our two Weimaraner dogs, Heathcliff and Parker, lay like cosy grey foot-warmers on either side of his slippered feet. Not that his feet actually needed warming, on what would likely become a sweltering hot summer's day in Albuquerque. This was exactly where I'd expect to find my husband, sitting at this time of the morning, after he had dutifully walked the dogs. We lived in the mid-town neighbourhood of Albuquerque, New Mexico, with an urban-suburban mixed feel about it, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Not that I would describe myself as a quintessential city girl. Not at all, but I thoroughly enjoyed my busy life here. The city is flanked with the Sandia Mountains to the east, West Mesa to the west, and the Rio Grande and Bosque flowing from the north to south. My husband was a brilliant professor at the University of New Mexico at the time. He was a practical man who saw life as very much black and white. There was no in-between, no grey shadows in his personal paradigm that he possessed of the world. As he had no time for obscure, ambiguous, far-fetched claims or ideologies that had no basis on reality or foundation in the truth, the kind of nonsensical suggestions that might be forced to stretch your imagination like an elastic band. As such frivolous, facetious, puerile and ditzy indulgences were to him just clickbait on social media platforms, to draw in the intrigued like an insect caught up in the silken fibres of a spider web, tangled up in the muddled, warped confusion of exaggerations that ensnared and enticed so many. In my husband's practical world, 4 + 4 = 8. The sky was blue. The world was a predictable place where the sun rose every morning and sank in the evening like clockwork. Let's just say he loved the reliable, customary, prosaic routines of everyday life, and he lived regimentally and religiously by the clock. As for him, the sanctioned flowing sequences of life were as comfortable as the sheepskin slippers he wore on his feet when he read the Wall Street Journal on a Sunday morning, while eating his warm croissants smothered with butter and jam, washed down with strong filtered black coffee. My husband did not like surprises in any shape or form, as they would inevitably derail and disrupt the smooth, seamless flow of the rich tapestry of his life, as if the wrong colour of trespassing thread had inadvertently been incorporated into the fabric, like a hostile impostor or invasive intruder that didn't belong. I stood there for a moment, drying a coffee mug in my hand, with a tea towel, as I watched my husband with an affectionate smile on my face, as his devoted, unfailing love for his prescribed daily routines always amused me. I think my husband's methodical, instinctively habitual ways are what had attracted and drawn me to him all those years ago in the first place. I had found the security and safety I craved in him. He was my soft place to fall, so to speak. Growing up as a young girl, I was like a little fish being flung from one stream to another and another. It wasn't a comfortable place to be, as the constant yo-yoing changes of my life was chaotic, disruptive, uncertain, and very disorientating for one so young. My parents had travelled around so much that I'd never ever felt settled. No sooner had I put my feet safely on solid ground and was beginning to make brand new friends at a new school, my parents would up and leave all over again, like a pair of restless jackrabbits with ants in their pants that were never satisfied with their burrow, as the grass always smelt greener somewhere else. I was never sure why my parents had such wandering nomadic spirits. They were compelled to always be on the move all the time, like a pair of travelling gypsies. I often suspected we may have had Romany gypsy roots somewhere in our bloodline, when many gypsies arrived in large numbers to the Americas from Britain in 1850, Sometimes I think they were running away from themselves. It would seem they were easily bored and clandestinely hankering after an exciting adventure of some kind. I would say, "Mummy, Daddy, can't we please stay here? I don't want to move all over again. I'm making new friends at the school and I really love this place." My mother would say, "Honestly, Viola, what are you like, dear? This town is driving me absolutely nuts. I can't hack it a moment longer. Without pulling my hair out, have you seen how parochial and small town the people are around here? It's ridiculous." My father would say, "Your mother's absolutely right, Viola. There is nothing here for us. We need to move on. This place is humdrum, very boring if you ask me. Nothing going on here at all. Dull as dirty bathwater." If we moved to a big city, my mother would say, "Oh, I can't stand it here. I can't bear it a moment longer. Everywhere we go, there are people breathing down our necks. The traffic is making a god-awful noise every day. And there are hooting taxicabs everywhere and people getting into fights on the sidewalks. Why, I nearly had my bag snatched the other day by a very shady-looking character, I might add." Once again, my father would chorus his agreement with my mother. "Your mother's absolutely right, Viola," he would say. "This place is far too crowded for us. Too much noise here. We need to be able to breathe again. We need to go to a smaller town, a place with prepossessing views, I think." If there was anything predictable about both of my parents, it was their incessant desire to fly away, like migratory birds, always looking for the quintessential nesting place, but never really being able to lay down roots anywhere. Even now, all these years later, I'm still getting postcards from my parents from all over America. One minute they'll be living in a small town in Kentucky. The next minute they'll be living in Houston in Texas. Suffice to say, in recent years, they have adopted an RV. When they realised that a life on wheels would graciously accommodate their restless spirits, and it seems they have never actually looked back from this travelling lifestyle. I remember when I first got married to James, my mother and father pulled me to one side discreetly and said, "Do you really want to marry a university professor, sweetheart? Aren't you scared to death you'll get bored out of your skull?" For them, bored was a dirty, offensive and vulgar word in the English dictionary that should never be entertained under any circumstances. Little did they know that I hankered after a stable life. Being bored sounded very reassuring to me, as it magnanimously offered up to me a promising silver platter of foreseeable certainty and assurance, which were extravagantly gratifying to me. I had been starved of these virtues my entire life. I was crying out for the fresh, invigorating oxygen and fresh air of normal, begging for the mundane, longing for the fabulously ordinary, like a gift I was aching to receive at the bottom of my Christmas stocking. I found this priceless, precious treasure in the reliable, steadfast loyalty of my husband James. My husband was as stoutly dependable as a sunny, cloudless day that would not rain or vacillate and waver with unexpected cold spells and meteoric downpours. James, my husband, is very easy on the eye, a handsome man with a warm olive complexion, a full thick head of salt and pepper coloured hair that shows off his piercing blue eyes superbly. I'd say he's one of those men who looks a lot better as he ages, rather like an excellent fine wine. The silver fox look really does suit him. Many of the young girls at the university would heartily agree with that, as many harbour clandestine crushes on him. My husband's perfectly symmetrical features, along with his masculine square jawline, always guarantees that women give him a second glance. Let's just say it used to drive me stark raving mad when on Valentine's Day our postbox was heaving and groaning under a plethora of cards that had been sent to him from many students obviously nurturing secret crushes on him. One year I counted over 51 Valentine cards for my husband, and the only forlorn, sorry Valentine card that I actually received was predictably from him. It did make me feel very overshadowed. I was almost tempted to buy a bunch of Valentine cards to send to myself so that I didn't feel so upstaged, but that would have been pitifully sad, pathetic even. But I'm not going to lie, the thought did actually cross my mind. It astonished me that my husband could have so many cards from admiring fans, but then he does ooze a plethora of charm. As Sophia Loren always used to say, looks are fleeting and are soon forgotten, but charm is memorable and it'll get you noticed. Many young people are drawn to his warmth and his unpretentious charisma. I think the most Valentine's cards I ever got in my life was possibly 3, and that was a very good Valentine's Day indeed. Every Sunday morning, my husband has day-old stubble on his chin. He never shaves over the weekend, but I quite like the ruggedly masculine look. He's one of those frustratingly annoying people who stayed exactly the same waist size since he was at high school, and no matter what he eats, he remains slim. I, on the other hand, only have to look at a pizza or a slice of chocolate cake, and let's just say I can feel my pants begin to tighten almost at once. Anyone else who knows what that's like, it's not a good feeling. Let's say to look at, I'm not anything special. I think I've got the quintessential girl next door kind of looks. Shoulder-length brown hair worn in a bob, hazel brown eyes with flecks of green, and a heart-shaped face. My husband thinks I'm drop-dead gorgeous. I suppose that's enough for me, at least he thinks that. But I do question his eyesight at times. This morning, like every other morning, my husband's routines are much the same. He rises out of bed at about 8 o'clock, takes our 2 Weimaraner dogs in his truck for a walk at a nearby park. He then stops by the local baker's and picks up half a dozen croissants and some newspapers. He loves to spend half the morning going through them. The Albuquerque Journal, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post I think he enjoys reading the most. I think he likes the feeling of the paper between his fingers, and is very old-school traditional in this regard, following faithfully in his father's footsteps, who like him was also a university professor. It seems that the apple does not fall far from the tree. My husband looks up at me from the paper quizzically. "What are you staring at, Viola? Why, I do believe you've been standing there for over 2 minutes, gawking at me, as if I'm an unusual specimen in the zoo that you've never seen before. Either that, or have I got chewing gum in my hair or something?" "None of the above. Sorry, James. I was miles away." "Look at this," he says, lifting up the paper. "I'm a Pisces star sign, am I not?" I look at my husband in surprise. As for him, talking about something as nonsensical as an astrological star sign of the zodiac was as foreign as hearing a goldfish showing an interest in the green grass, the flowering meadows, and the cows grazing in the field. "Yes, you're a Pisces, that's right. But since when, James, have you been interested in star signs? I didn't think you believed in stuff like that." "I don't. How can people believe any of this hocus-pocus stuff and nonsense? Really," he says, folding his paper so it crinkles in his hands. "We live in such a gullible society these days that can't think for themselves. Look at my star sign today, for example. I'll read it to you," he says, lifting up the paper closely to his glasses. "This is a week of unexpected surprises for you. A small thing could unravel your plans this week and turn everything upside down, creating upheaval and chaos." "We don't need to hear that. Not when we're going away in a couple of days. I don't want anything to go wrong. I've been looking so forward to this trip. By golly, we need it," I say. "Oh, don't be ridiculous, sweetheart," says my husband, running his hand across his stubble. "You do allow your imagination to get the better of you sometimes, Viola." "What does my star sign say?" "I hope it's a little bit more positive than yours is, emitting the words chaos and upheaval, and of course unexpected surprises. I don't need any of that." "What star sign are you? I'm not into that kind of thing, so I don't know. What is the 30th of August then?" "I'm Virgo. 30th of August is Virgo. We're supposed to be realistic, blunt, self-sufficient, witty and hard-working. Although we can be accused of being arrogant and critical. But the more people get to know us, the better they tend to like us. That's all I know." "You're not arrogant or critical, sweetheart. The reverse is true. But yes, you are realistic. You don't have your head in the clouds. Oh, here we are. Let's see what it says. Open your mind to the impossible, and the impossible will find you.
Open your eyes to what you cannot see, and you might see it, for opportunities are open for you this week. And be open to making an unlikely, idiosyncratic friend who may just cross your path fortuitously.
I hardly think we're going to be making new friends. Not while we're on holiday staying at a remote beach house off the Oregon coast, far from everything. It doesn't exactly inspire itself to making friends. Besides, I've got lots of friends here in Albuquerque.
There you go, says my husband, laughing. None of this stuff is remotely true. Don't look so serious about everything, Viola.
I just don't want anything to go wrong on our holiday, that's all. I've been looking so forward to it. I've been so excited about it. I fancy the isolation, getting away from people, being on our own with the beach sand caressing our feet, the sunshine warming our shoulders, and the blue surf twinkling under the morning sun. It doesn't get better than that.
Why would you think anything could possibly go wrong? Asked my husband. That's rather a pessimistic outlook for someone as positive as you, is it not?
I sigh. You're right, James. I am being pessimistic. It's just we've had such a tough year, haven't we? I guess you could say nothing really went right this year. If I was to actually write an astrological prediction for the year, I would have written, "Tear this one out of your life. This will be a year of loss, a year of disappointment and heartbreak."
Don't let that cloud the holiday for you, says my husband. I'm sure we'll have a great time. I know we've had a rough year, but we're not alone in that. There are many people out there like us who had a tough year this year, much like ourselves, worse even. As King Solomon says in his writings, there's a season for everything, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to uproot, a time to weep, a time to laugh, and a time to tear, and a time to mend. We just need to pick up the pieces of our lives and march on. You know what my father used to say to me when I was growing up? If you hit rock bottom, you cannot sink any further. So the only way is up. My mother was not an academic, like me or my father, but that woman had a sagacious, wise head on her shoulders, and she was always right. I think I see a lot of her in you, you know.
It had indeed been a tough year for me and my husband, the kind of year most people would wantonly remove from their calendar, if given the choice. In 1 year, me and my husband had lost several people close to us, including our teacup Yorkshire Terrier we had owned for 13 long years, that my husband fortuitously ran over in the driveway when he returned home one night. A beloved member of our family, lost so tragically and so needlessly. Even for my husband, who was normally stoic about most things, losing our furry boy under the wheel of his truck had been a bitter, hard pill to swallow.
I didn't see him. I was driving very slowly. Then I felt the bump, he explained, and I just knew I'd run over little Goofy.
If that wasn't bad enough, I lost my best friend to breast cancer. It had been the most bizarre case of cancer I'd ever seen. I was soon to learn that disease can behave differently in the bodies it chooses to inhabit. It would seem that was certainly the case for my best friend, who was so well, so healthy, so vibrant, with no signs of any problems that would make you conclude that she was actually seriously ill. She had no pain, no bizarre symptoms, apart from suffering from this insufferable exhaustion from time to time that would come on her in waves. I told her to visit her GP, get a full diagnosis, but my friend wouldn't listen to me. She avoided the doctor like the plague. My friend had used the internet to self-diagnose herself, something we're told we shouldn't do. She informed me that she had chronic fatigue syndrome, upon which there is no cure, so she was stuck with the condition. I took her at her word, but a week later she was found dead in her bed, having died overnight in her sleep, which I'm told is the best way to go, and I can't actually argue with that. To my amazement, her body after the post-mortem was discovered to be riddled with an aggressive form of breast cancer. Ironically, the coroner said she was one of the lucky ones, not having major symptoms experienced by most, which would involve chronic, debilitating pain. She had none of that. Even better, she didn't know she was dying. It would seem she had a lucky escape from the chaotic upheaval
that often comes with a cancer diagnosis. She was spared of all that indignity, all that debilitating soul-destroying grief, as was her family, but it didn't make her loss any more easy. If that was not bad enough, a month later my husband lost his parents, who on a trip to Alaska were killed tragically in a plane crash, on one of those small planes when the good weather just suddenly turned and became tumultuously turbulent, and the plane plundered towards its watery grave. If there was any consolation to be seen in these unexpected deaths, in all cases the victims had been spared of any suffering, and so in the darkness there was a glimmer of light, in a manner of speaking. Let's just say it was only those left behind that had to pick up the pieces and make sense of it all. And for me, I couldn't do it. I'd lost my very best friend, and given how during my childhood friends were a rare treasure that I could not easily acquire, given the way my parents moved around so much, and we never stayed in one place long enough to make friends. So losing Tonya, the close friend I had acquired when I married James, was a cruel blow. It was hard for me not to take these unheralded deaths personally. It felt almost as if the universe was choosing to unleash its unmerciful wrath on me. It had taken me a long time to actually smile again. Me and my husband James decided we needed a break away from it all, away from people, from the frenzied, topsy-turvy disruptions of life. Suffice to say, after a lot of research, I found this perfect house online, situated on a remote ribbon of beach in Oregon. It seemed to me that this place was calling to my heart, as strange as that may sound. We hired a truck when we arrived in Oregon, and drove to the prepossessing beach house, a log home made from massive old-growth logs, imported all the way from Canada. It twinkled under the light of the afternoon sun, almost as if it was smiling down upon us, like a long-lost friend that we hadn't seen in quite a long time. The congenial house wore its heart on its sleeve, as it did not hide its warmth from us, or pretend to be something it was not. It was a square building with a grey slate roof, floor-to-ceiling windows that masterfully maximised the transfixing coastal views. The house itself was nestled on an undulating viridescent mountainous incline, rather like a matchbox on top of a green mountain. It was sumptuously carpeted with rich verdant grass. The rear of the property was fringed by magnanimous clusters of velvety Douglas firs and spruce trees. You could observe a long ribbon of golden beach sand stretching before us in a long vertical trajectory. Beyond the golden beach sand was the vast sprawling expanse of the aquamarine ocean, with its billowing ocean waves, tossing, bouncing, pouncing and bounding towards the shore, with an unbridled rambunctious enthusiasm that could not be tethered or tamed, while it gently rolled towards the sand, caressing it delicately with bubbles of white ethereal foam. I could observe sculptural rocks trespassing, jutting impertinently through the aquamarine water, like the bumpy appendages of a large, powerful sea creature, rising majestically through the ocean waves. Looking up into the vast canopy of the cobalt blue sky, seagulls pirouetted and sailed above the clouds, floating with the wind, surfing the horizon, their wings outstretched, their ha-ha calls drifting above the sound of the crashing ocean waves. I felt for a moment as if I was locked up in paradise, caught up in a dreamy world where you are taken on a magic carpet in your mind during moments of soulful reflection and deep meditation. "It's beautiful out here, isn't it?" said my husband. "Penny for your thoughts. For a moment there, you seemed so far away." "I can't help it. I guess for a second I got caught up in the beauty, like the seagulls soaring up there in the sky. It really is magnificent out here, isn't it? And better still, there isn't a solitary soul in sight. We've got this place all to ourselves. It doesn't get better than this. And look over there. There's a helipad with a circle marked H for any helicopters." The inside of the house was well presented, with quartzite and hand-scraped acacia floors, with dramatic river rock fireplaces and very high ceilings, along with extensive brickwork that married into the stone and wood, creating an old-world traditional effect,
The whole house had been perfectly decorated, with stunning sumptuous furnishings, soaking baths, and a very well-appointed kitchen, fitted with all the latest mod cons. We would be able to sink into the sea sand during the day, to embrace the incredible views, and to our cosy beds at night, between the finest Egyptian cotton sheets, upon which no expense had been spared. In the late afternoon, me and my husband walked along the beach, holding hands with our pants rolled up over our knees, as the cool ocean waves swept across our feet with a cold, refreshing blast of fizzing water. We sat down on the beach to watch the sun set over the horizon, mesmerized by the tangerine sky. It was in the early hours of the morning that my husband woke me up. I was groaning, as the inconvenience of being disturbed when I was so tired, and caught up in the throes of what seemed like a riveting dream. I groaned, "What is it, James? What's the matter?" "I'm in great pain. It's excruciating. I can't describe it. I've got pain in my flank area, on the back here, under the rib cage. I feel as if I want to throw up and be really sick. I can't even seem to pee, and when I do, it stings like hell. I don't know what's going on here." I watched as my husband paced up and down awkwardly, trying to find some comfort in his movements, but finding none. I could hear him trying to vomit, with wincing guttural noises that didn't cooperate with his desire to hurl up the contents of his stomach. I quickly did research online about his strange symptoms, and I discovered that he either had a urinary tract infection or a kidney stone. He was doubled up in pain, and despite his protests, I called for help. I couldn't sit back and watch my husband suffer such debilitating pain. "Supposing it's nothing," he said. "I'll look like a complete imbecile." "Supposing it's something, James. I've lost too many people this year. I'm not about to lose you as well. Let me tell you, pain is an indicator that something is wrong. Remember when I had that dreadful tooth pain? I had to have a root canal done. If I'd left that pain unattended, it would have become an abscess. Do you know, in the olden days, infections like that would actually kill you. People died from infections like that." The helicopter arrived on the helipad to escort my husband to hospital. He suddenly told the EMTs he felt a lot better. "I don't know what's happened here, but I want to tell you that I'm feeling a lot better now. The pain seems to have just vanished. I'm feeling much more like myself. I don't think I need to go to hospital after all. It was excruciating for the last hour, but it's just disappeared." "Sir, I'm not happy with what you're telling me," says the EMT. "It sounds like you have a kidney stone. Maybe it passed through to the bladder, which is why your pain is gone. But you may have other stones in there. Some might not be able to pass so naturally. You need to go to hospital, have a routine scan, your urine tested, and blood work done, so we know exactly what's going on with you. You may need antibiotics for an infection, and painkillers, of course." "You think it's a kidney stone?" I asked the EMT. "I'm no expert, ma'am, but it sounds like it is. I won't be happy until your husband is fully checked out." "Isn't it funny?" I said to my husband, who is now feeling as right as rain, his painful recall now a faint memory of the past. "Remember your horoscope? It said a small thing could unravel your plans this week. I wonder if the small thing the horoscope was talking about was in fact a gallstone of all things." "Wow," said my husband. "That is quite a coincidence. I'll give you that." Suffice to say, my husband did have a kidney stone, which the doctor said had passed through to the bladder, so the pain had disappeared. But he'd have to pass that stone through the urine, and that could potentially be rather painful. The scan also showed my husband had a plethora of gallstones that needed to be removed in an operation at once. As these ones he would not be able to pass, they were too big. My husband persuaded me to go back to the beach house and enjoy myself. "I know it might be lonely for you, sweetheart, but I don't want you hanging around a boring old hospital. Go and have some fun for me, will you? I'll video chat to you in the evenings. I'll be back with you in a couple of days. You'll hardly notice that I'm gone." So there I was, back at the beach house, all on my own, overlooking the glorious views of the Oregon coast. I was really sad my husband wasn't with me, but I wasn't worried about him, as the doctor assured me he'd be as right as rain.
Needless to say, it would be a whole lot less fun without him around, but I was determined to thoroughly enjoy myself, and enjoy myself I most certainly did. In truth, I didn't feel alone at all, when I could hear the crashing ocean waves, the whisper of the wind wailing through the trees, and the caw-caw or ha-ha sounds of the seagulls. I felt as if I was in very good company, as the natural world hugged me effusively, like a beloved old friend. I kept abreast of all the developments at the hospital on my cell phone, and by all accounts, my husband was doing rather well. One morning I decided to get up at the crack of dawn, before the sun actually rose over the peninsula. The water is very cold here at the Oregon coast all year round, so you'd need a wetsuit to embrace those waves, if you're brave enough, that is, as the temperature of the water, even in summer, barely gets above 58 degrees. But I didn't mind getting wet, up to my knees in the icy water. It would be invigorating, I thought. It was about 4:45 when I arose out of my bed. I'm not used to getting up this early, but I did on this occasion. The weather was pleasingly warm, as it was summer, and the temperatures during the day can sometimes get up to 80 degrees. It was dark in the house, but I switched on a couple of lights and made a flask of warm coffee and a ham and cheese sandwich. I put it in a shoulder bag, along with a towel, a book, some sunscreen and a torch. I thought it would be fun to walk on the beach in the early hours of the morning, even when it was dark, until I waited for the sun to rise, which would be at about 5:22. I closed the front door behind me, ambled over to the steps embedded in the mountainous hill that led down to the soft beach. It was really dark outside. For a brief second, I had slight reservations about whether going down to the beach at this time of the morning, when it was so dark, was actually a good idea. It felt a little intimidating, as I'd always had issues of being afraid of the dark when I was a young girl. Its residual bodeful influences had never quite escaped me. I told myself to get a grip. I was the only solitary soul on this beach, for goodness sake. It would be fun to watch the sun rise in 20 minutes, and being on the beach when it happened would make it all the more magical for me. I glide down the steps cautiously with my torchlight. The moonlight casts its soft, floaty, wispy shadows across the landscape. But many of the dense geographic features, including the tall, imposing, needled trees, are lost and shrouded by the dark veil of the twilight that conceals and overlays much under a dense blanket of secrecy. There is a soft, invigorating breeze blowing across the water. I can hear the soothing sounds of the waves crashing against the rocks. I find a place to sit down as I sink into the soft but cold beach sand like a comfortable beanbag. I drink my delicious warm coffee, my eyes beginning to adjust to the darkness. I can feel the arresting beauty of this place, taste the salt in the air, feel the caressing gentle touches of a cool breeze whispering in my ears, nudging my skin. All of a sudden, the tranquil silence is disturbed by this agonizing shriek. Ah! It sounds like a child crying out in pain. My natural instinct is to run. I'm a schoolteacher in Albuquerque, and so hearing a child scream grabs my attention faster than anything I know. So I'm instinctively dashing towards the sound, running over the beach sand, the light of my torch waving precariously all over the place. The sound was coming from the jagged outcrops of rocks that jutted out from the edge of the beach. I run towards the rocky outcrop and hear the whimpering sound of a child in pain. Ah! I can see a small figure hovering over the rocks. "Are you all right over there? Are you all right? I'm coming!" I cry out, dashing over to the indeterminate figure, throwing my arms around what I assume must be a child, although what they're doing here, on a private beach like this, at this time of the morning, has not even entertained my thoughts, nor has it preoccupied my questioning mind for even a second. All that concerns me right now is a child is in distress and needs my help. I see the Delphic figure. He appears to have his foot caught between the crack of two rocks, and is struggling to get it out. "Are you all right?" I ask. "What happened?" The child continues to whimper. And the light of my torch travels from the face to the foot. This is not a child. This is a young Bigfoot. I'm so astonished by what I'm seeing.
befuddled by how human this Bigfoot child is. In truth, he's no different to any of the kids in my class at school, only he's covered in a great deal of hair, has overlong arms, and a very distinct pyramid-shaped head. The creature soothed by my presence, relieved by my company. The Bigfoot child points to his foot, stuck between the cracks of the rocks. How the hell did he get his foot in there, I wonder? The creature starts talking at me, explaining how it happened in a language I don't understand. But he seems delighted in sharing all the details of how his foot became ensnared by the 2 cracks in the rock. The way he's going on and on, the information he's unloading, sounds so riveting, I could actually write a book about it, if I knew the hell what he was trying to tell me. I lean over to touch the Bigfoot's foot. I try to pull it out of the crack, but it simply won't budge. When I try to pull it out, he whimpers and cries out in pain. All I can do is cradle him in my arms and stroke his long hair, telling him it'll be all right, but in truth, I don't know what the hell to do to help him. All of a sudden, I hear a whistle. The little Bigfoot's eyes light up. He whistles back, and then I hear feet bounding towards us. And in the light of my torch, I see a huge female Bigfoot standing only feet away from me. For a moment, she's standing very still, like a towering, lofty tree, looking at me with a bemused, rather bewildered expression on her face, as if I was the last person in the entire world she expected to see. And she's not quite certain how to react to me. I'm so in awe of this female Bigfoot. She's majestic, graceful, agile, easily 8 foot tall, with massive shoulders, a very slender but muscular build, and small breasts. The little Bigfoot is talking to his mother earnestly, telling her exactly what happened. She seems to ask him a few questions. Their language sounds like an ancient indigenous dialect, incorporating a plethora of clicks. The Bigfoot female races over to her son, bending down to examine the damage, and studying the crack and her child's foot rather curiously. She wiggles it around the crack for a while. And for a while then, with one huge thrustful jerk that happens so fast, she successfully pulls her child's foot out of the crack. And the Bigfoot child can't protest because it happens so quickly. He doesn't even scream out. And lo and behold, his foot has been removed from the crack. But I'm certain it's got to be damaged. How did it get out of that confinement? Me and the Bigfoot female are hovering over the foot to examine it closely. The little Bigfoot rises to his feet and attempts to walk on the foot that has been trapped, and his foot is perfectly fine. I'm ecstatic. I start clapping, and the Bigfoot female begins to clap as well. Our eyes meet, and the 2 of us have a meeting of minds, a moment when an unlikely friendship is born between us. I notice she has the most exquisite, beautiful eyes that I've ever seen, that in the dark give off a yellow eye shine. The little Bigfoot begins to whoop with delight, realizing that his foot is absolutely fine. And to demonstrate this fact, he begins to run up and down the beach. Okay. The Bigfoot female points to the horizon and to the beach, and I know she's asking me to join her, to watch the sun rising over the peninsula. I feel so privileged, so blessed. In that moment, despite her great gargantuan size, I wonder how anyone in the entire world could ever be terrified of such an intelligent, majestic creature, who is more human than many people I actually know. The creature has a heart on her, as large as the ocean. We sit there in silence. I'm seated between the Bigfoot child and the Bigfoot mother, like a single inconspicuous book between 2 very sizable bookends, as we stare up in awe at the enchanting sunrise. At first the sun, like an obsequious, reluctant child, being woken up by its mother, struggles to make much of an impression. but slowly and surely it emerges from the dark shadows, as it peeks curiously through the clouds, and the wavering blue light scatters, creating delightful prisms of tangerine orange to burst across the sky in a golden glow that reflects and twinkles brightly on the water. It's beautiful, I say, and so are you and your son. It's such a pleasure to have met you. The Bigfoot studies me with her twinkling bright eyes and says something I don't understand, but I believe she's saying thank you, and so are you beautiful, and so was it a pleasure to meet you as well. Well, those were the impression her words conveyed to me. I just wish my husband would believe you were real. I think, as she looks at me, nods her head, and gracefully glides away. For a brief moment, I saw a twinkle in her eye, as if she'd read my very thoughts. Of course, when I told my husband about my outlandish encounter with the idiosyncratic Bigfoot duo, and about the little Bigfoot getting caught up in the rocks, he looked at me nonplussed, as if he thought I'd been smoking pot while he was away in hospital, or drinking way too much wine, and I was seeing things that weren't actually really there. You try telling a hardened cynic that Bigfoot is real, and he'll look at you as if you've lost leave of your senses.
"Are you sure you're all right, sweetheart?" he asked me with concern. "I think you look a little peaky. You didn't spend too much time in the sun, did you, when I was in hospital?"
I feel grievously annoyed. There's nothing worse when someone won't believe you when you tell them something. Why won't you listen, James? You said yourself I'm a realistic person. Why would I make any of this stuff up? I promise you it's absolutely true, I told him. Even my horoscope mentions something about making new friends and to be open to opportunities. And it was absolutely right, although I didn't expect my friend to be of the hairy kind. And it was right about the small thing unravelling your plans as well. A gallstone disrupted a few days of your holiday. You have to admit, both accounts are true.
My husband rolls his eyes. "You know what I think about that, sweetheart? I think it's just a very convenient coincidence. Yes, it does seem that my little gallstone held up the holiday. But the fact that the astrological sign got it accurate doesn't mean a thing. It's what you call coincidence. Lucky chance."
My husband was now fighting fit, but he had been in hospital and had over 13 gallstones removed. He was as right as rain, back to his normal self. The man whose life was dictated by common sense, dappled by sound reasoning, that always found a reasonable explanation for everything, and was not buying my incredulous story, not even for a single moment.
"You know what I think? I'm not trying to be unkind here, but I think you had a very lucid, vivid dream. And it was so vivid you thought it was real. So you think what happened was true. That can happen, you know. But surely you can't expect me to believe such a doubtful, implausible story."
I was thoroughly enjoying the rest of my holiday with my husband, but had seen no sight or sound of the Bigfoot. But one afternoon, as we were walking along the beach, the female Bigfoot crosses our path, nods at me, and then darts across the beach sand. I know she did that for me, to show my husband that not everything is so black and white. I'll never forget my husband's expression. Oh, I wish I could literally keep it forever locked in the memory of my mind. He rubbed his eyes, looked at me and said,
"Did I see what I thought I just saw?"
I nodded.
"I think I owe you an apology."
It was the Bigfoot female, I tell him, the one I met. I think she deliberately showed herself to you, as she knew from what I told her in my mind that you wouldn't believe my story."
"My word! Who would have ever thought a creature like that could really exist? I'm completely floored. I do apologize, my darling. I can't believe it. I've had a real awakening today."
All these years later, I think of my incredulous encounter with those cryptic Bigfoots with a wistful nostalgia. And even though my husband is still resolutely set in his ways, he has to admit that not everything is as black and white as he first believed. So there you are. That's my story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners. Me and my wife, Pearl, moved to the Oregon coast after I retired. which was something I had planned years in advance. It was always on the cards. I just loved it in this part of the world. The ocean spoke to my heart from when I was a young boy. I'm not exactly sure what it was saying when the waves thundered ebulliently against the rocks, thrashing sprays of white bubbly foam against the sculptural contours of their hard, unyielding surfaces. But let's just say there was something mysteriously enchanting about the ocean that grabbed my attention, that whispered tenderly to the depths of my soul, that tugged at my heartstrings. It was in this soulful place that I knew I truly belonged, and in truth there was no other place in the entire world I'd rather be than right here on this ribbon of beach sand, staring out at the wide blue yonder. The wistful nostalgic memories of my days as a little boy would take me right back to the same familiar ribbon of beach sand that I knew so well, where I would toddle around happily with my bucket and spade, staring in awesome wonder at the great ocean expanse stretched out before me, aquamarine waters that were constantly moving, expressing their thoughts with the undulating waves that rolled tempestuously towards the shoreline, fizzing on the golden sand, as they mischievously tried to catch my feet out. I would thoroughly enjoy its icy discharge, always giggling when my feet had been caressed and caught out by the water, while my ears never failed to revel in the sound of the crashing water that was oddly reassuring, surprisingly comforting. Then there were the familiar sounds of the squawking seagulls that would hover in the blue sky, hungrily looking for some easy pickings, sometimes even food from our own picnics, which would be eagerly snatched away. I loved the feel of the sea sand as it tickled my toes, and how much the gusty wind blew against my face. The smell of the sea salt that lingered in the air fragrantly, that you could taste on your tongue, and most of all the beguiling sunsets and sunrises, when the sky was illuminated with an orange glaze that always took my breath away. How much I loved it all. I remember making fabulously huge castles in the sand with my bucket and spade, collecting shells on the beach, watching the fascinating sea creatures in the rock pool, of which there were many, but the starfish held my intrigue. I even told my grandmother that one day I would own her property. Well, our house, I mean. I remember her smiling at me warmly and asking me, "Why would you like to live here, little George?" I would look at her and shrug my shoulders and say, "Because this beach house is my home, and so is the beach, and the ocean. The ocean is also my home." My grandmother must have taken me at my word, as she left me the beach house in her will. She exclaimed that the Oregon beach house was mine. George told me as a little boy that this beach house was his home, so I took him at his word, she wrote in her will. When my grandmother died, I was living with my family in a small North American rural town, the name of which I would not care to mention for obvious reasons, where I was the town sheriff. So in the early years, my young family gravitated to my grandmother's beach house for holidays, and me and my wife Pearl decided that this was the quintessential place where we would retire when we were older. It was a no-brainer for us, as my wife was equally as enamoured with the beach house and the beach as I was. We knew we would invest money into creating the perfect holiday retreat that would one day become our permanent residence. So even as a young man, I looked forward to the day when I would retire in this place that I so considered to be my home. When my first daughter was born, I began to see the world through a slightly different lens, courtesy of the strange events that would soon follow. I had come from a staunchly religious background, but my daughter Julianne, when she was about 4 years old, would have the most graphic, haunting nightmares. We would wake up in the middle of the night to hear her shrieking. Suffice to say, even in the throes of sleep, she would be oscillating her arms like an angry octopus, as if trying to fight something off, as if she was being attacked or harmed by someone, but no one was ever there. Me and my wife would rush into her bedroom, trying to calm down her dreadful sobs. Sometimes she seemed inconsolable with grief, her eyes just filled with terror. My wife would rock her in her arms, stroking back the black curls from her face. "It's all right, it's all right," she'd whisper. "Nothing can hurt you now. Mummy's here.
Mummy won't let anything bad happen to you. But, Mummy, the bad men are killing my family. They won't stop. There's so much blood. It's everywhere. It was my turn to take my daughter into my arms, and I told her, "No one is being harmed, sweetheart. It's just a nightmare. Can't you see? We're all absolutely fine. Look, there's no blood on me. Mummy and Daddy are not hurt. As I keep telling you, it's just a dream. A bad dream. That's all it is. Dreams aren't real, sweetheart." "Not you. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about my other mummy and my other daddy. The mummy and daddy I had before you. Before I came here." At this I was stunned, rather confounded. But I gave the matter no further thought. Until one day me and my wife were grocery shopping in the supermarket. My 4-year-old was seated in the trolley, and when she saw an African-American man entering the shop, she was filled with dread, and hastily bounced out of the trolley and tottered out of the grocery shop as fast as she possibly could on her tiny little legs, dashing across a busy parking lot where someone nearly ran her over in her desperate attempts to get away. My daughter was crying sorrowful tears that were streaming down her face. She seemed terribly afraid. A woman pulled down her driver's side window and said to me, "Oh, Sheriff, I nearly ran over that poor little girl over there. She came out of nowhere like a bullet. The poor little thing looks quite spooked. I wish parents were more responsible with their kids and didn't let them go running around parking lots like this. It's so irresponsible, such dreadful parenting, if you ask me." The woman thought I'd come to rescue someone else's child, not realising it was my own child that I was rescuing from her nonsensical, irrational, rather questionable behaviour that I could not fathom. I was naturally rather furious with little Julianne for dashing out of the grocery store like that. She could have been killed if she hadn't been seen by that approaching car. I could not make sense of her outlandish behaviour. She had always been a particularly well-behaved child. "Why, Julianne, did you run into the parking lot? You know you're supposed to stay in the trolley with Mummy and Daddy. If you misbehave next time, you can't come shopping with us." "There was a chocolate man in the shop. I'm scared of the chocolate man." For a moment I thought my daughter was talking about chocolate figurines. You know, the ones you get wrapped up in colourful aluminium foils, like Father Christmas in chocolate. But I soon realised she was haunted by the African-American man who had entered the store. I couldn't understand why she'd reacted like this to a very gentle-looking, unassuming, nice man. As young children are not conscious about culture or race, are they? So it was rather peculiar. "It was a chocolate man that looked like him that killed my family in Zimbabwe," she suddenly piped. "The family I had before God sent me down to my new mummy and daddy." I was nonplussed. How could my daughter even know Zimbabwe existed? My little girl went on to tell me that she was a white 15-year-old girl living on a tobacco farm in Zimbabwe during Robert Mugabe's land seizures, when many white farms were being snatched away from the government. One day everyone in her family had been hacked to death on the farm by chocolate men whom had even violently killed her own family, their pets, along with her father's chocolate farmhands, who were very nice people, she told me, and had tried to protect the family, but they too had also been savagely slain. She remembered her previous life with such a poignant accuracy that I couldn't doubt what she was telling me. She was 4 years old and had absolutely no knowledge of African history. Neither did I, for that matter. Indeed, the continent of Africa only ever featured in my thoughts when I thought about lions and elephants. My daughter was even able to point out the president when I showed her some photographs on my computer. "He was the new boss of Zimbabwe. A horrible man. My other daddy, the one before you, said his head was funny on the inside." I took that to mean that he was perhaps as mad as a hatter, and indeed from my research I did on the matter, many people seemed to think that this was the case, but you had to keep such thoughts clandestinely hidden, or heaven help you. "My daddy went to see him because of the death threats he was getting. The man laughed at him, said that Africa belonged to the chocolate people, and that the white people needed to go back to England or to America, as Africa was not their home, and they weren't welcome there. She said that many of the chocolate men had hated her family for being white. They liked to hurt us. It made them very happy, she told me, her eyes brimming with tears. Daddy, why did the chocolate men hate us for being white? I don't know, dear. Politics is very complicated, I told her. It's very silly to get upset about skin colour, because we're all the same underneath. But there are good and bad people in this world, and they might have white skin, olive skin or black. Do you understand that? It doesn't matter what colour their skin is. Some people are good, and some people are bad. My 4-year-old nodded as if she understood. But there were some nice chocolate people on the farm who worked for my daddy, but they were killed by the bad men. I could not believe my 4-year-old was spouting out all this stuff to me, like a water out of a whale's blowhole, so seamlessly, when in her daily life as a little 4-year-old girl, she never spoke like this with such an articulate grown-up reasoning. It was almost as if a faint glimmer of that 15-year-old girl had shown me her face for a brief moment in my 4-year-old child. It was as if she wanted her voice heard from beyond the life she may have once actually lived. There was blood everywhere, Daddy, on the floor, on the walls, everywhere. And the horrible men, after they hurt us, they danced around the house, singing happily, while they burnt it down. I was still alive, Daddy, when it burnt down, but I don't remember it actually hurting me. She told me that when the angel took her up to heaven, through the long dark tunnel with the pretty light at the end, that the angel said that the men who had hurt her family had a lot to learn, and that karma would soon strike them down. My little 4-year-old girl didn't know what karma meant. By the time my daughter was 6, she had no memory of her nightmare, nor of her life as a 15-year-old girl on an African tobacco farm. I do remember one day when she heard the news that Robert Mugabe was dead. My daughter couldn't understand why she was so pleased. It was like this unfathomable sense of relief came over her. Imagine hearing that some obscure leader from a distant, unfamiliar country had died, and you are reassured by the news, and yet you know nothing about that leader at all. It was like that. It even flummoxed her. Julianne was middle-aged at the time, with children of her own, but she said to me, I don't know why I'm so terribly pleased to hear this news. I don't even know this man. Maybe it's because he doesn't look like a very good person. But I knew beneath the layers of her reasoning lay a dormant, long-lost memory that had been tweaked. It seemed there were people all over Zimbabwe not too upset about the dictator's demise, while others were grieving his loss. I couldn't pass judgment one way or the other, as I knew nothing about African history, the president of Zimbabwe, or the land seizures of white-owned farms, but I did marvel surreptitiously, to myself that is, over a 4-year-old's vivid recall of a previous life she claimed to have lived that had ended so tragically on an African tobacco farm. Let's just say after my daughter's enigmatic behaviour as a 4-year-old girl, I had much more of an open mind towards things that you can't explain, like cryptid creatures and haunted houses. Let's just say I was less cynical than most. When your paradigm of the world has been so dramatically shifted as mine was after my daughter's claims of a previous life, of which I could find no fault or reason to actually doubt. Indeed, after my research in regards to the matter, I found stories of people who remembered past lives very vividly all over the world, even a young woman who remembered her life in Egypt in a temple, who later on worked as an Egyptologist and pinpointed areas where they might find lost gardens and missing undiscovered tombs. Her findings to date had been astonishingly accurate, for it was her memory of her past life that had led archaeologists to these extraordinary finds and discoveries. They could not explain her knowledge unless her claims were true, and that she had lived in those ancient times. So there were many people open to the idea of reincarnation, while others insist that such a concept is completely impossible. Let's just say after my daughter's claims, I remain on the fence about it. You have to decide what resonates with your truth, I think.
While I was sheriff in town, and when my children were both teenagers, I do have memories of peculiar events that left you wondering what the hell happened there. One sticks out in my mind more than the others. One day a woman called Mrs. Audrey Phillips called me at my home, complaining that she was being stalked by something. I went over to see the woman at her home, whom I knew well from church. She was on friendly terms with my wife Pearl, and they both went to the same book club together. By all accounts, she was not a woman given to nervous anxiety or wild enigmatic claims. But on this particular occasion, she was in a dreadful state. She claimed something was after her, and that she'd seen the most evil face staring at her through the window, that had grinned at her maliciously, glaring at her with glowing red eyes. My deputy sheriff, who was on duty that night, thought the woman was completely balmy, but I did not. I decided I would personally attend to the matter myself, given that my deputy sheriff was almost sniggering about the woman's preposterous allegations, as if it was all just a big joke. I knew better than to jump to wild conclusions like that. Mrs. Phillips lived in a remote farmhouse off the beaten track, but when her husband left the farm for a few days with their 2 dogs to go and visit his parents, she had decided to stay at home to take care of their chickens and their horses while he was away. She didn't want a farmhand to take care of her horses, as she always liked to be hands on deck in this regard. I arrived at the farmhouse at about 12 at night, driving down dirt tracks devoid of street lights, flying past indeterminate meadows, rugged outcrops, lakes, farmhouses and woodgroves, so all of their obscure, ambiguous details were obliterated by the uncongenial carpet of darkness that ravenously swallowed up the geographic details of the landscape, so that everything I passed looked like dense cardboard cutouts, without any definition, shade or tone. It didn't help that the moon herself seemed to have taken a rain check, for her dwindling light appeared to be suppressed by a thick foggy haze that seemed to hijack her light, and even the stars were like dusted diamonds upon which most of the light had lost its twinkling lustre. When I arrived at the property and drove down the smooth cement driveway, the lower floor of the double-storey house was completely bathed in light, as the lights were all left on throughout the house, as if the light offered the woman a measure of comfort, while all the outside lights were left on. I noticed all the curtains were fastidiously drawn, in all the rooms apart from the sliding doors in the living room area, as the living room curtains were being dry cleaned at the time, I was told later. The first thing I noticed was that there was a huge commotion going on, a very loud racket in the stables, as the horses were neighing and beating at their stables with their hooves, as if they were busting their guts to get out of their confinement. I have never heard or seen horses making such a kerfuffle before. It was complete pandemonium. If they carried on this way, I reasoned they could do themselves some serious physical damage or harm. I could see the curtains twitch as the nervous woman peered through a little crack as my police vehicle neared its approach. I parked close to her front door, switching off the engine, climbing out of my truck, slamming the door behind me. Mrs. Phillips burst through the front door like a cuckoo from a cuckoo clock and came racing towards me. She was wearing a dressing gown over her pyjamas and a pair of fluffy slippers on her feet. Her grey curly hair was tousled messily over her ashen face, while her cornflower blue eyes were filled with abject terror. She was clutching a rifle in wobbly hands that made me seriously doubt she was capable of shooting at anything. Let's just say her whole body was trembling violently. I've never seen anyone this fearful before, apart from my little daughter when she was 4 years old, experiencing those reoccurring nightmares. "I'm so glad you finally got here, Sheriff. Sorry to have called you at home, but your deputy sheriff was laughing at me when I called. He asked if I was drinking or if I was high on something. I don't drink, Sheriff. There's something out there, something dreadful. The horses are hysterical. Please, Sheriff, let them out before they destroy the stable block, or worse still, themselves. I can't go over there myself. Believe me, I tried, but Sheriff, I couldn't do it. Something is watching me, and whatever it is, it's very big and very evil. I'm so scared to even help my horses. Sheriff, I fear it's a demon. It was staring at me with bright red eyes at 8 foot off the ground. I know I must sound like a rambling madwoman, but, Sheriff, I saw something. It seemed not of this world. I'm not given to a wild imagination, Sheriff. You can ask your wife about that. But there is something out there. Believe me, there is. Can't you feel it, Sheriff? The energy around here. It feels tainted by a grievous heaviness. I can feel the evil in my very soul. I told her to go into the house at once, and I'd check out the property for her, which is exactly what I did. It was a tenebrous, treacherous night, and I don't use the word treacherous lightly. There was something very evil about the night, a bodeful energy, a heavy, menacing, oppressive atmosphere that lingered over the entire property. Even the chickens, I noticed, were clustered together tightly in their coops, while the neurotic horses were in a terrible, frantic state. I'd never seen anything like it. I decided to let them out of their stables, and they bolted out of the stables, like rockets charging into space, racing towards one of the meadows, galloping as fast as they possibly could. They couldn't get away fast enough. I watched them as they disappeared to the edge of a field, where they clustered together so tightly like a bunch of grapes, and kept staring out towards the stable block, almost as if they could see something that I failed to see. In a trice, I felt a chill running down my spine. I knew something was up. Horses don't behave with such a clamorous affray, unless there's something terribly, terribly wrong. They're highly intuitive creatures. I ambled around the farmhouse considering whether I should call for backup or not. Everything felt really off about this inauspicious, malevolent night. But that wasn't reason enough to call for reinforcements. But I was struck by how quiet everything was. It was so airily still. But in the sound of silence were the screams of soundless voices, beating hearts, trembling bodies, that remained as unflinching as a frozen block of ice. In the subdued deadness of this night you could have heard a pin drop, as not even the crickets and frogs dared to call out. Even the distant calls and howls of the coyotes had been suspended, for everything sensed that beneath the hemorrhaging, gloomy darkness there lay concealed a predatory, menacing foe. I could sense something watching me. I could feel eyes burning into my back. I knew I wasn't alone. But when I turned around, nothing was there. It was so annoying knowing something was there, but not being able to see a damn thing. I don't recall ever feeling so frustrated. I had my revolver clasped in my hand, and was turning around every corner, with my fingers on the trigger. I was stumbling around awkwardly with my torch, everything veiled by a dense, foggy blackness, indicative of a night when even the moonlight had retracted her favour, while the stars' twinkling light had been ferried away on the wings of the mist. For a fleeting second, I see these blazing, vindictive red eyes staring at me, from 8 feet off the ground, and this thing, whatever it is, appears to be clandestinely hiding behind a tree. I then hear this discomposing growl that is beyond anything I can describe. It reverberated through my entire body, almost like an electric shock, whizzing right through me. I was so petrified that I hurried quickly back to Mrs. Phillips' house, my heart thundering violently in my chest, and my face as white as a sheet. But the moment I entered the house, I told myself firmly to get a grip. I couldn't let Mrs. Phillips see how shaken I was. I knew something was out there that was insanely evil. I could feel it in every fibre of my being, but I was not about to communicate my aroused trepidation to Mrs. Phillips. "Is everything all right, Sheriff?" "Everything's fine, Mrs. Phillips," I say, trying to appear nonchalant and calm, which wasn't easy to pull off, as I'm no great actor. I didn't want to scare the woman, who appeared to be barely holding it together, as I could see she was trembling, and even when she spoke to me, her teeth would chatter. I called for backup, telling the team I'd seen a suspicious shadow in the woodgrove on Mrs. Phillips' property, and I wanted to ensure she was safe, and that no one was prowling around. "Yes, I need backup, that's right. No, it's no laughing matter. There is genuinely something or someone on this property. It was very shadowy, obscure, but I need it investigated just to be sure that Mrs. Phillips is absolutely safe. That's right.
See you soon.
So you did see a shadow, said Mrs. Phillips, eyeing me curiously, having eavesdropped on my conversation. You saw something, Sheriff, didn't you? Please tell me. Right now I think I'm going to lose my mind.
Well, I just want your property to be thoroughly checked out, that's all. To make sure there's nothing here.
I didn't under any circumstances want Mrs. Phillips to suspect that I myself was freaking out. I knew something was out there, but I couldn't fathom what it actually was. And sometimes it's best not to say a single word to avoid creating any panic. Oh, thank you, Sheriff. I can't tell you how much better that makes me feel. You can see it's so tense out there tonight. Something's not right. The horses have never been so discomposed before. And the chickens, they don't behave like that, all cooped up together like that. I always think animals are intuitive, Sheriff. They know when something's not right. You make yourself nice and comfortable, Sheriff. I'll bring you a coffee. It steadies my nerves to keep myself busy.
That's not necessary, Mrs. Phillips. It's very kind of you to offer, but I'll be just fine.
I'd rather busy myself, Sheriff, making you coffee if I may. The memory of that haunting face staring at me through the window. It's giving me the heebie-jeebies. Look at me, Sheriff. My arms are shaking like a leaf. I could swear, Sheriff, that was the face of the devil I saw. He was there one moment, gone the next. And I swear he was mocking me, almost as if he enjoyed scaring me half to death.
Well, that would be very kind of you, Mrs. Phillips, then. Come to think of it, a coffee might be just what I need.
Cream and sugar?
Cream and 1 sugar. Yes, thank you very much.
I was standing in the living room, champing at the bit, as I waited for my backup to arrive. I almost felt silly about calling for backup, but something was out there, and it wasn't giving me a good feeling. I felt as if everything on this property was in danger. I was brooding over the red eyes I'd seen. I was thinking about who or what they could possibly belong to. I was standing there in the only room in the house where there are no curtains to cover the glass sliding doors, although the outside light was on, so you could see the turf in the backyard very clearly. That's when I hear something knocking at the glass pane of the sliding door. I look up in horror to see this thing staring in at me. I nearly freak out, for I can see this creature so vividly, and he was made of the substance of your darkest, most discomposing nightmares. I can feel the most ghastly chill dashing down my spine, as my body stings with a pronounced trepidation. The creature is the most hideous, gruesome thing that I have ever beheld. He's about 8 foot tall, with the head of a wolf and the body of a man, standing up on 2 feet, with a thicket of dense, short hair, the colour of black coal. His eyes are like blazing red traffic lights, and his canine teeth are smirking at me. Worse still, he has 2 rows of these teeth. The creature is actually grinning, as if he's getting off on tormenting me, and this gobbly thick goo was actually dribbling out of his mouth. The creature was there for a second, and then gone the next, and I knew better than to tell Mrs. Phillips what I'd seen. Of course, when we did a thorough police search over the property, we found absolutely nothing. Isn't that so typical? But I always got a sense that the wolf-like monster was laughing at us in the dark shadows, watching us from somewhere. Suffice to say, the curious, ambiguous creature was never ever seen again on Mrs. Phillips' property. But I am certain that this idiosyncratic wolf-like humanoid was having a blast, scaring us to death. And to this day, I believe this was unequivocally the case. But I will say this, all the police on that search exclaimed they could feel the most dreadful evil, the likes of such they had never experienced before, that was as pronounced to them as an obnoxious vile smell would be. Of course, in my line of work, I'd heard all kinds of stories of cryptid creatures and unusual sightings, but the wolf-like humanoid that I encountered was not something I'd ever forget in a hurry. Let's just say when I retired from my job as sheriff in a small town, I seriously thought I'd left behind all the chaos and disarray of the strange, enigmatic peculiarities that had sometimes crossed my path, but I couldn't have been more wrong about that. When me and my wife Pearl moved into my grandmother's beach house, we settled into our new abode so seamlessly. It felt like this intriguing part of the world was where we naturally belonged. I knew that the ocean had always spoken to my heart. The beach house was nestled on top of a high hill, like a sparkling white jewel, with floor-to-ceiling glass sliding doors that opened up onto large patios, giving you spectacular panoramic views of the coastline from miles around. There were other beach properties further along the way, but as we were the last property on this stretch of coastline, which ended up in a quintessential cul-de-sac, it felt very private in our location, where you could observe jutting rocks rearing their obtrusive but sculptural heads through the surf like ginormous sea creatures. There were a collection of rocks on the furthest end of the cul-de-sac, where you would observe the most marvellous rock pools bursting with abundant sea life. My favourite spot to observe the starfish when I was a little boy. My late grandmother's property was fringed by an abundance of trees on every side, so it boasted privacy in every regard. When we moved into our house, I always got a sense when we were out and about, walking across the beach, that we weren't alone. It wasn't a menacing feeling, but it definitely felt that something or someone was watching us. On one occasion I discovered these huge footprints on the side of our house that couldn't have been made by a human being. They were so huge, with a slightly splayed right toe, that suggested this individual had never worn shoes a day in their life. A Bigfoot, I wondered to myself. Surely not. I thought it might explain the feeling of being watched all the time, and account for the size of the large footprints, but I never gave the matter any further thought. I began to realise that shortly after moving to our new home, I was being followed whenever I left my property by a white Honda truck that conveniently didn't have a registration number to check out. I kept telling myself I was imagining things, but this white Honda truck kept appearing in my rear-view mirror. One day my wife spotted a man in town when she was shopping, claiming to be an old friend of mine. "I knew I recognised you," the man had told her. "You are the sheriff's wife. Fancy spotting you here by the Oregon coast." "Me and my husband have retired," she told him. "He's around here somewhere. I'm sure he'd love to see you. He just slipped off for a moment. My husband knows so many people. Sorry, I don't mean to be rude, but what did you say your name was?" The man indicated to his cell phone and quickly answered it. He nodded at my wife and, mimicking with his hand gestures that he needed to take the call, he was gone, and she never saw him again. "I wonder who he was," she said to me. "Such a nice man. Had to rush off in a terrible hurry. I didn't get his name, but he recognised me as your wife and spoke very highly of you when you were town sheriff. Such a small world," she mused. One weekend my wife had gone away to stay for a few days with her sister who lives in Florida, so I was left at the beach house all on my own for a couple of days. With my wife away, I thought it would be a great opportunity to get some much-needed things done. So I spent my time fixing a couple of kitchen cabinets in the kitchen and some drawers that needed brand new hinges. I decided to repaint one of the bedrooms in a very attractive off-cream colour. By the end of a long, exhausting day, after having worked very hard, I sat down to watch some ice hockey on the box, and then finally retired to bed. It was late in the night, and I was awoken to some strange banging noises. The only way I can describe the noise is it sounded as if a metal bar was being banged against the drain pipes of the house. The noise was terribly loud. Was someone out there? I wondered. Then I heard the loud thumping sound of someone banging the front door. I was tired, burnt out, exhausted from the previous day, my eyes drenched with sleep, my body subdued from its natural desire to investigate the unexplainable. But the inbuilt policeman inside me, that needs to find answers, reluctantly drags me out of bed. It's almost as if someone has thrown ice-cold water over my face, as I bounce from being consumed by exhaustion to a hyper-alert state. What the hell was going on? I hurriedly put on my dressing gown and slippers and quickly dashed towards the entrance hall to open the front door. I look through the peephole and see no one standing there. How odd. I'd heard someone pounding the door. I know I did. I pull back the chain and open the door cautiously, but no one is standing there. It's tenebrous, but there are soft prisms of moonlight dancing through the sky, casting their delicate shadows across the yard. I can detect the vertical silhouettes of the statuesque imposing trees with their velvety needled boughs jiggling against a slight blustering wind. that is nudging my face with a cool whisper of fresh air. I can hear the tumultuous sounds of the feisty ocean waves crashing tenaciously against the rocks, and smell the sweet fragrant salt in the air, laced with an infusion of pine. With my torch in my hand, along with my revolver, I edge around the house, my torch scanning the immediate area, but once again I see absolutely nothing. That's when I hear the banging sound again, but this time it's coming from the ribbon of beach, a similar sound to what I'd just heard earlier, around the house, only it's slightly further away. The sheriff in me guides me to the beach. I want to find out the origins of this peculiar, enigmatic noise. I sense something feels off, but I want to get to the bottom of this mystery. What is that sound? I cannot see much as I venture onto the beach, pulling my slippers off as it's not easy to walk on the soft sand in your shoes. The sand feels soft to the touch, but cool beneath my feet, and the sound of the ocean is significantly louder as I'm now closer to the sea. I flash my torch up and down the long ribbon of beach, and everything is remarkably quiet, beyond the rambunctious whipping sounds of the waves and the punneling breeze. In a trice, something pushes me forcefully down onto the sea sand, and I fall backwards, losing my footing. My revolver has been tossed away from my reach, while my lighted torch lies yards away from me on the sand, its light offering me good visibility. I'm staring into the blazing blue eyes of a man whom is filled with an intense hatred. So much so, he's almost spitting in my face. The man is huge, beefy, very powerful, a hell of a lot stronger than I am. "Hello, Sheriff!" he screams at me above the sounds of the ocean waves so I can actually hear him. "Do you remember me? Because I most certainly remember you, Sheriff. I've been waiting for this cosy tete-a-tete for a rather long time, I'll have you know. And finally we meet. I got to meet your delightful wife a few weeks back. Lovely lady she was. I made sure she was away before I sprung my little surprise on you. Wouldn't want the little old dear to get in the way, would we, of our cosy little reunion? I had to be certain I found you, Sheriff. You've changed a lot since I last saw you. I can see age has crept up on you, and you're not quite as fit as you used to be. I've been following you around, Sheriff, in my white Honda. I'm surprised someone as sharp and discerning as you has not noticed me. You see, Sheriff, I don't forget. I'm like a bear with a sore head, I am. While you've been around living the high life, I've been rotting away in a prison cell, missing out on it all. Now that's hardly fair, is it? Do you remember what you said to me that day you arrested me, Sheriff, all those years ago? You said to me that you hoped I rotted in jail, that I should have been locked away for a very long time, for life, you said. Now, Sheriff, your words I did not forget. I never forget. When I was a young boy at my school, no one ever spoke bad to me. If anyone did, they knew they'd be beaten to a pulp. But you, Sheriff, can tell me that I should rot away in prison, and you think you can get away with it? Not on my watch, Sheriff. Never on my watch. I know who you are, Tucker. I remember you clearly. You deserve to go down, I piped. Many kids died because of the contaminated drugs you sold them. You knew those drugs were contaminated, potentially dangerous, very harmful, but you cared only about filling your deep pockets, did you not? You should have gone down for murder, not just for dealing drugs. You got off lightly, in my opinion. You beat up people who didn't pay you back on time. 2 young boys ended up fighting for their lives in hospital, but were far too frightened they refused to testify against you. You think you can play God, Sheriff, do you? You think you have a right to judge me because of a few pills that I sold to kids? Because I punched a few people that were disloyal to me? I'm no pushover, Sheriff.
Do you remember what I said to you, Sheriff, when I saw you last? I said I'd come back to get you, and here I am, as fully promised. You see, Sheriff, I keep my promises. While you have been getting older, I have been getting stronger, doing thousands of push-ups in my cell. Not much else to do, he says, displaying a huge bicep bulging from his string t-shirt, obviously to intimidate me. So what are you going to do? Tucker, beat me to a pulp to get your revenge? Is that it? Oh, Sheriff, please. Beating you to a pulp for costing me several years of my life, locked away in a dingy, suffocating prison. No, Sheriff. I'm going to extract the ultimate form of revenge. I'm going to kill you. You see this plastic bag? I'm going to put it over your head. I'm going to take great pleasure in watching you suffocate to death. And then I'm going to throw you out in the ocean once I've removed the plastic bag from your head. So your pretty little wife will think you drowned after taking a dip. No one swims in these waters, Tucker, without a wetsuit, not even in summer. The water is icy cold here. Well, then, the blustering wind blew you over the rocks, and you drowned. I start to wrestle this man, but I'm no match for him. He grabs my hands and ties them around my back very securely, and then places a plastic bag, a very, very strong plastic bag, over my head. He then lets go of his hold on me, and with my arms tied behind my back, and not being able to see a thing, I'm cocooned in a hazardous nightmare where I simply cannot breathe. I cannot see, and I can't get this plastic bag off my head. I drop onto the ground, trying to use the sea sand to break through the plastic, and I hear the man laughing at me. You may be locked up in the plastic bag, Sheriff, but I was locked in a prison. Your time will be over soon. I was not so lucky. You're lucky because I could have beaten you to a pulp. This is a good way to go, Sheriff. I'm rubbing the bag like sandpaper, using the sea sand as an exfoliant to break through the plastic. I even tried to bite the bag from the inside with my teeth, but my valiant efforts are unrewarded. The plastic bag is exceedingly tough. I'm suffocating. My lungs are begging for breath. My fingers are trembling, trying so hard to get out of their stranglehold. My heart is pounding. I'm frantic. Time is running out. I know I'm going to die. I hear this roar. Something heavy thunders towards us. I hear Tucker saying, "Bloody hell! What is that?" The next thing I know is the plastic is ripped off my head. I take desperate gasps of air, and Tucker, who has grabbed my revolver, is trying to shoot at something. I notice the obscure, ambiguous figure is huge. Moments ago, Tucker looked huge, but this thing, whatever it is, dwarfs Tucker and makes him look ridiculously puny. Tucker tries to shoot at this thing, but he jumps out of the way, and the bullet misses him. The light of my torch has lit up the scene perfectly. It is enhanced by the faint light of the moon. I'm still taking in deep, desperate breaths. My lungs are trying to catch up with my head. What the hell is going on? Tucker's face is the picture of terror. The creature's back is turned away from me, and he's growling at Tucker fiercely, snatching the revolver from him. The next thing I know, the creature has thrown Tucker over his shoulders. He runs over to the outcrop of rocks, overlooking the deep ocean. I can see him clearly. The creature thumps Tucker on the back of the head and throws him into the ocean. I know he's dead, as he'd not have survived a bash to the head, and even if he did, the icy cold water would surely kill him, especially if he's been knocked unconscious. He will almost certainly drown. I feel no pity for him, no remorse, as he was solely responsible for innocent young teenagers losing their lives, thanks to dodgy pills. I realize this creature is a Bigfoot. He glides towards me, standing a few yards away from me. I hear the words in my head. "He's gone now. He won't hurt you ever again." Thank you for saving my life," I say. The creature nods at me, as if it's no big deal. I can see he's about 8.5 feet tall, 700 pounds, covered in long flowing black hair,
with a cone-shaped head slung low on his shoulders. I don't see much evidence of a neck. The creature has a handsome, noble-looking face. The skin was grey and leathery, the cheekbones high, the eyes deep-set and hooded, but a beautiful, rich, dark colour, with a yellow eye-shine. The hair silky, smelling like the salt of the sea, not pungent or offensive. If the creature was scary, it was his intimidating size, but that was cancelled out by his gentle, serene nature. This creature had saved my life, and for that I'm truly grateful. Suffice to say, Tucker's body was washed up on another beach. It was presumed he'd bumped his head really badly and drowned in the ocean. One officer phoned to tell me that the man I thought should have gone to prison for life had finally been found dead. He was thrilled with the news. I didn't tell him I knew already, nor did I tell my beautiful wife about the Bigfoot. Let's just say some secrets are best not shared, but I feel safer knowing he's out there, and I'm ever thankful for him. So there you are. That's my story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, I've just received my post from my postbox in Anchorage, Alaska. I'm sitting comfortably in my truck while I rifle through the post, and I see an atypical card in a bright red envelope which immediately grabs my attention. It looks intriguing, a whole lot more exciting and fascinating than the standard brown mail I normally receive. Who is this from, I wonder, examining the writing, which I don't recognise. Weird, I think, tearing back the envelope rather curiously. Maybe I have a secret admirer, I tease myself. Chance would be a fine thing, although let's not kid. There are some extremely eligible bachelors living here in the rough country of Alaska, looking for women exactly like me, who are willing to embrace a maverick, nonconformist, free-spirited way of life. But I'm not ready for settling down, not yet. Besides, it's not like I actually get to meet many people in my off-grid lifestyle. I'm not exactly a social, dynamic, interactive, gregarious personality. Alaska attracts many self-contained, autonomous, hermetic characters rather like myself, hankering after a life close to nature, away from many of the modern conveniences and advantages of everyday life. Believe it or not, I had been persuaded once to enjoy a hypnotherapy past life regression session, booked for me by an alternative friend of mine, who gave me the session as a Christmas present. I'm open-minded, so I shrugged my shoulders and said why not. I came through as a lonesome trapper in a former life called Hank, that had loved living on his own with his dogs, in the remote, barren wilderness. I had to laugh at that. It was hilariously funny. If there was any truth to the story, it would seem I had not deviated from my solitary, sequestered ways. Even when I was at school, all my report cards would say almost exactly the same things. Eve is withdrawn and introverted. She loves to isolate herself from people. She tends to keep herself to herself. She doesn't socially interact with the other kids, nor does she participate in class very much. It was not that I didn't like people, far from it in fact, but I loved spending time on my own. Some people find that enigmatic to comprehend and even understand, and truly, I do get it. But for me, solitude brings a huge measure of peace. I've always needed my own private sanctuary. It would seem that, like the indigenous wild animals in the Alaskan wilderness, I was likewise born an unorthodox person, with a free spirit. I loved living on my own with my golden retriever Ernest. I called him Ernest, as he always had an earnest expression in his dark eyes. He was a big dog with the fluffiest cream coat you've ever seen. Suffice to say, most people mistook him for a Pyrenees mountain dog, because he was so large. Then again, most things are much larger in Alaska, from the wildlife to the geographic scenery here. The glacier-garbed mountains that stretch to the horizon, that are magnificently reflected in the lakes here, dyed a bluish hue from all the silt. Then there are the highway passes, volcanoes, exquisite coastline, sprawling vast expanses of open wilderness, and of course, last but not least, the northern lights. Let's just say these chocolate box prepossessing views, inviting many international tourists to come to this part of the world to ogle and admire the Alaskan scenery. But the truth about this beauty, it does come with pain, Much like a rose with a thorn, there is a price to be paid, living in this last frontier, as many people mysteriously go missing in the Alaskan Triangle every year, never to be seen or heard from again. And rumours abound about what could possibly have happened to them, from being attacked by a wild animal, a bear, hellhounds, skinwalkers, dogman, the Kushtaka, otherwise known as Ottoman, Bigfoot, abducted by aliens, entered into a portal or different dimension, even a stargate. As many believe, there are a plethora of mysterious, hidden, clandestine gateways here to other realms. So the wild speculation goes on, but no one has ever arrived at any substantial answers or conclusions that carry much weight. So all these fanciful, far-flung theories are clouded with the milk of obscurity and uncertainty. Let's just say living here is not easy, especially during the winter months. In January, our temperatures can drop down at night to 9.3 degrees Fahrenheit, and I don't have to tell you how bitterly cold that is. Yet despite the hardship that life engenders here, I love it all, I really do. And I would never live anywhere else in the entire world. Alaska is my beloved home. It's a quintessential part of me. There rarely is a great feeling one gets from conquering obstacles and challenges in life, being able to overcome adversity in all of its forms. You don't have to win a gold cup at the Winter Olympics to feel a huge measure of successful satisfaction, as surviving here in Alaska in grueling sub-zero conditions, numbing Arctic weather, makes everybody a gold medal winner in my book. I also adore the unusual congregations of wildlife we get here. I regularly get visited by 2 bald eagles, a male and a female. They come and perch on the balustrades of my wraparound porch to visit Ernest, my golden retriever, and my large tabby cat Muffin. Let me assure you, these unusual idiosyncratic animal interactions I've only ever seen in Alaska, and I doubt would happen quite so much anywhere else in the world. They hang out together on my porch, my cat, my dog, and the 2 majestic bald eagles. It is a spectacular sight to behold, and as bizarre as it sounds, they are unlikely friends. They genuinely get on, and always look forward to seeing each other. I open up the card in the red envelope, which bounces up into a dolphin jumping over a wave, and the card bursts into merry song, singing happy birthday to you. Every time I close the card and open it up again, it bursts into song. It's an eye-catching card, quite a showstopper really. I don't think I've ever received such a flamboyant card before. It had been my birthday about 3 days ago. Not many people remember my birthday, with the exception, of course, of my mother, who usually phones me a day after the event, as even she can be a tad forgetful, I hasten to say. You see, if you're living off the grid in Alaska, it can be easy to forget the days of the week and think it's Wednesday when it's actually Friday. I read the print which reads, "I bounced over a wave to wish you happy birthday," and then the scribbling scroll which reads, "Remember me, sis. Long time no see. Hope you're having a great birthday. Love, Jason. P.S. Couldn't resist this card. I know how you love dolphins. Remember the fluffy dolphin I gave you for your birthday once? Have you still got it?" Little does he know, Ernest now owns that fluffy dolphin that resides happily in his dog basket, among many of his fluffy trophies. Ernest is very particular about his fluffy toys. I gasp in astonishment. What a bolt out of the blue. Are you kidding me? The last time I'd seen Jason was over 10 years ago, when I was 15 years old, and my mother had foolishly married his father, so subsequently Jason had become my stepbrother for a very short period of time. Let's just say he thoroughly enjoyed the privilege of having a sister, but the feeling was not reciprocated. By all accounts, he'd made the most of having a sister in his life, which was a new curiosity for him. He was tirelessly teasing me and giving me a hard time over everything. In truth, there'd be no love lost between the 2 of us. Well, not on my side, that is. My mother's marriage to his father had folded, rather like a camping chair that had seen better days, and after 1 year she filed for divorce. I think the relationship fell apart because they had so little in common, and it took them a year to find this out. that it wasn't actually going to work out for them in the long term. It happens here a lot in Alaska, people getting married for companionship reasons, so that you're in good company on those cold, long winter days. But it really does help to actually like each other. I had never been more relieved in my life when my mother left that relationship behind her. Finally our lives would return to normal, and I wouldn't have to put up with the garrulous, ever-inquiring stepfather of mine, along with his irritating son. Now this blast from the past has come blustering back into my life like an unwelcome wind. How strange, I think to myself. What made Jason contact me after all this time? How peculiarly odd. Don't tell me that he actually feels remorse for teasing me so much 10 years ago. That was hardly likely. I don't think Jason would have a remorseful bone in his body. Growing up, he'd always been up to all kinds of tricks that only he found amusing, as usually his tricks would be at somebody else's expense, most usually me. I was often the butt of his jokes, arriving at school with sandwiches crawling with maggots, or drinking water swimming with tadpoles, or frogs bouncing out of my rucksack, or which he found hilariously funny. Sometimes with a sticky note attached to my back saying, "Kick me, I'm an ass." And all day perfect strangers would come up to me, kicking me in the backside, until someone was kind enough to point out the note on my back. One day he put glitter spray in my wash bag, and I sprayed my hair with the hairspray, arriving at school with everyone giving me funny looks. I was even called into the head's office to explain myself, as my hair had been sprayed bright green. Of course, Jason had found the whole thing terribly funny. Ernest is making a frustrated noise at the back of his throat. When my dog does this, I know he's saying, "Can't we move on now?" I look up at my dog affectionately. "We're going soon," I say to Ernest, as I put the rest of the boring post on the passenger side seat. I'll look at that later, I decide. Ernest is leaning over the back seat, watching me through his soulful black eyes. I always sense he understands what I'm saying. He wears an intelligent expression on his face and wags his tail in agreement. For in Ernest's world, I am always right. That's what's great about dogs. They love you unconditionally. And Ernest is my best friend in the log cabin, where I live alone, with my big fat cat Muffin, and of course Ernest. 3 of us against the world, you could say. The 3 musketeers. Muffin loves idling away the long hours by a snug crackling fire on a comfortable couch, and staring at you through half-shut, very sleepy eyes. Muffin's only activity is to wobble over to his food bowl, but if his feathery bald eagle friends arrive on our porch, he darts out onto the porch like a bullet. I've seen him perch on the banister of the porch, yards away from his bald eagle friend, and it's the most endearing thing to watch. On one occasion the bald eagle was eating a dead rabbit, and kept throwing pieces of meat to Muffin, who ate them hungrily. The bald eagle obviously knew what I'd always known, that the direct way to Muffin's heart is directly through his rather sizable stomach. I spent the rest of my morning in Anchorage picking up a few supplies, and then I'm off on my merry way, back to my off-grid lifestyle, 4.5 hours drive away from Anchorage, where I live on a remote piece of land in a log cabin that bears a remarkable resemblance to a Swiss chalet. I rely on generators for energy and water tanks for my water supply, and let's just say I get through a lot of chopped wood during the winter months, which I chop myself. Who needs a gym to keep fit? Alaska is my gym, and it makes you a hell of a lot fitter than a treadmill or a bunch of stair climbers, let me tell you. Those kind of things would be a piece of cake for me to tackle, but so insanely boring. When I drive down the road in my truck, I almost stop dead in my tracks when I see a white Dodge Power Raptor truck parked outside my cabin. Bear in mind this is the middle of nowhere, so who is this unlikely stranger visiting me out of the blue like this? I don't like unexpected visitors or surprises. I don't know anyone who owns a truck like this. What can I say? Is this morning going to be blistered with fortuitous events? First, a surprise birthday card from a stepbrother I haven't seen in years, and now a stranger serendipitously parked outside my cabin. I grab my revolver from my glove compartment. I'm naturally always guarded and suspicious of any strangers that come onto my property. As soon as I park my red Toyota Land Cruiser, I see the driver's side door of the Dodge Power Raptor open, and a man climbs out. He doesn't look threatening, but you can never be sure. Appearances can easily be deceptive. I learnt that a long time ago. The man looks to be my age, but a little bit on the thin side, rather underweight. On seeing me, he hobbles over to my truck. I must admit, he doesn't look terribly well. His face is all ashen, as if the colour has been sucked and drained out of his skin. But my first thought is, who the hell is he? And what is he doing parked outside my property in the first place? My hands are clenched tightly on my revolver. As I'm suspicious of anybody that I don't know, it's always wise to be cautious. The man staggers forward and almost collapses on the side of my truck. "Who are you?" I ask, rolling down my driver's side window.
"I'm your brother Jason's friend. He was on special operations with me to take down a drug dealer in Anchorage."
"He's not my brother," I say gingerly. "He was my stepbrother for a year, that's all. We're not even related by blood. I'd hardly even describe him as my friend."
"He said you'd say that," says the man, grimacing,
as if fighting off spasms of pain. He hands me a burner phone.
"Just press the caller number. You'll get through to Jason. He needs to speak to you on my account. He'll explain everything."
I reluctantly take the burner phone from the strange man, pressing the caller number, pulling up my driver's side window so that he doesn't hear my conversation. I have in mind to give Jason a piece of my mind. How dare he lumber me with this peculiar man? What the hell is he doing?
"Hello, sis,"
comes a familiar voice at the end of the line that doesn't appear to have changed a lot in 10 years.
"Hope you liked the birthday card. Rather a charming card, I thought. Long time no see. How long has it been? I think it's 10 years. Have you been missing your favourite brother? I'm sure you have. No one has pranked you as well as I have over the years, I'm sure of that."
"Jason, what is all this about? Why is there a strange man on my property who looks like he's about to pass out in any second? He really doesn't look well. Why is he asking me to phone you? And more to the point, why is this man connected to you? Who is he? Furthermore, how the heck do you actually know where I live? I haven't been in touch with you for years."
"Finding out where you live, sis, is not hard. I'm on the police undercover drug operations unit, and it's our job to know things. I sent him to you, sis. He needs your help."
"Are you kidding me, Jason? It's not my job to look after your friends when they're feeling out of sorts. Do I look like a nurse? What's wrong with him anyway? He's clutching his chest. Clearly he's in terrible pain. In truth, he looks like he might just drop down dead in any second. Who the hell is he? What's he doing here?"
"He's my very best friend. Very good guy. He was in hospital. It's going to take him a while to recover. It was a close call. Touch and go for a while. Several life-threatening injuries that just missed the heart. He was shot in the chest over 6 times. So his body has been through a meat grinder, let me tell you. He was responsible for bringing down the big stud. A dangerous man, very dangerous, in an undercover drug operation. In truth, he's an unsung hero for what he did. He's one of the most courageous men I know on our team. He took down some notorious sleazebags, you know, but it came at a steep price. There is an evil man after him now, well known to the police, but he remains at large. This duplicitous, very vindictive character, I might add, wants to take my friend down, so he's safe there with you. No one would suspect he would be recuperating in a remote country cabin, way off the beaten track. He needs lots and lots of time to heal."
"Wait, Jason, what are you saying? That you've sent this perfect stranger to me, who's wanted by some bad guy? Are you putting my life in danger now? Because if you are, I'm not laughing. Do you hear me laugh?"
"Calm down, sis. Don't be silly. I wouldn't jeopardize your safety at all. I'm not that silly. You're perfectly safe. As I said to you, no one will suspect a thing. I know how these men think. You're out in the middle of nowhere. I knew your place would be perfect for Dustin, sis. I thought of my lone wolf sister straight away, with her incredibly kind heart. The two of you will hit it off together very nicely, I think."
"So I'm expected to nurse a strange man I don't even know, that you've just dumped on me like that? That's so considerate of you, Jason. You really are so thoughtful. I need this like I need a hole in my head. I really don't like strange men rocking up at my front door for nursing privileges.
He's not a strange man, sis. You're being very unkind talking like that. I keep telling you, he's my very best friend. I'm very, very concerned about his welfare. I want to make absolutely sure he makes a full recovery. He should still be in hospital, you know, but it's not safe. He's in a lot of pain. The doctors weren't terribly thrilled him coming out of the hospital too soon. But some things can't be helped. He had to be removed from hospital for his own safety. He's on a plethora of painkillers and other meds, but he needs time to recuperate and for his body to thoroughly heal.
I can see that. What's in this for me, Jason? I'm not in the habit of taking care of perfect strangers from the goodness of my heart. Out here it's tough, you know. Even looking after myself is not easy. I'm scraping a living selling my pictures to tourists here. I'm not exactly flush with the cash, you know.
That's my whole point, sis. You need the money. I'll be putting $100,000 in your bank account if you take good care of him. There is more where that came from, but that's if you do a good job.
$100,000? Are you being serious?
Absolutely. It'll be in your bank account in the morning.
You don't even know my bank details.
Oh, I know your bank details, sis. There isn't much I don't know. I'll be in touch.
Hold on a moment. I haven't agreed to any of this, Jason.
You're rarely going to turn down that kind of money. That's not like you, sis. You can't afford to. Imagine what you could do with it. You could buy yourself a new truck, go on a fabulous holiday.
All right, I'll do it. But how long is he going to be here for?
As soon as he's better, sis. Then he'll leave. Speak to you soon.
The call just ends. I wind down my driver's side window to look at the stranger.
I take it you've spoken to him, says the man looking at me apologetically. I'm sorry to have to do this to you. I really am. It must be a dreadful nuisance. Put you out. But Jason believes I'll be safe with you.
I grimace. It can't be helped. I just hope you'll be comfortable living in a remote wooden cabin with me. I have to warn you, I'm not actually the life and soul of the party. I'm not the gregarious, charming type. But I do make a mean filet mignon, and my potato gnocchi is legendary.
Sounds good to me. I'm not exactly social dynamite myself, and I am rather partial to potato gnocchi. In fact, I like it very much.
When I open the car door, Ernest races towards the stranger, his tail thumping excitedly. Ernest is a very good judge of character, and he instinctively likes the stranger. But he's an intelligent dog, and when he smells the area around the man's chest, he managed to contain his ebullience, as if he sensed the man's physical discomfort and pain. I imagine with his sense of smell, he can pick up the smell of the man's recent surgery. The man is clutching the side of my car, hunched over like an old man that is unstable on his feet and needs a walker or wheelchair. Oh dear, how am I going to help him? Do you think you can manage to walk into the cabin? You can lean on me if you like. If you don't mind my saying, you look like you came out of hospital way too soon. It sounds like your poor body has taken one hell of a beating. The man gratefully leans on my shoulder.
It wasn't like I had a choice in the matter. The man that's after me, he'd stop at nothing to find a way into the hospital to kill me. We all knew that. It just wasn't worth the risk. I don't fancy another near-death experience, I can assure you of that.
How do you know that man who's looking for you won't find you here? I don't need to invite danger to my door. I hope you appreciate that. I don't need any kind of trouble. I really enjoy the quiet life. That's why I live here all on my own, with my 2 animals.
I promise you, they'd never find me here. They'd never even dream of looking out here. I'm reasonably confident about that. Well, very confident. It was like driving around in a maze looking for this place. You rarely are out in the middle of nowhere. And your cabin, nestled on this big sprawling meadow, is fringed between the trees on every side. It's almost like a chameleon. I barely even noticed the narrow road that leads straight to your cabin. It's so inconspicuous, it's almost invisible. You really are out in the sticks here. But I will admit, it's breathtakingly beautiful. The views are outstanding. I get why you live here.
I wasn't very confident by this man's reassurance in regards to our safety, but I knew I needed the money. I mean, it's not every day of the week you're guaranteed such a hefty paycheck. Besides, by the state of him, he wasn't going anywhere anyway. It was a miracle he'd managed to drive to my cabin in the first place. By all accounts, at the best of times, my cabin was almost impossible to find. I knew this by the countless amount of people over the last 5 years have tried to find my property, with not much success, I hasten to say. If you don't know where to look, it's rather like looking for a needle in a haystack, trying to find my cabin. I lead the man into my living room, with the full intention of taking him into the spare bedroom, further down the passageway, but he's clutching his chest, heaving awkwardly, groaning out in agonizing pain. He's so weak, so out of breath, that I immediately direct him to the settee, which he sinks into gratefully. I can see the huge relief washing over his face. I pull off his leather boots from his feet and help him lie back on the couch. I cover him with a blanket and put a couple of pillows behind his head. He groans with satisfaction, and minutes later he's fast asleep. The poor man. He's utterly exhausted. It must have taken him all his energy to get to my property, and judging by the bagginess of his clothes, I would hedge a bet that since the fortuitous shooting, he's lost a considerable amount of weight, along with fitness and strength. I find myself feeling quite sorry for the man. He's been to hell and back, and a hair's breadth away from death. In truth, I wasn't sure how I felt about having a perfect stranger living under my roof with me. I was used to being on my own, so the dynamics in the cabin had significantly shifted, with another mouth to feed, and another presence that had interrupted the solitude of my maverick-like existence. I could see Ernest didn't seem to mind the stranger at all. He had rather warmed to him, and retrieved half his doggy toys from his basket, parking them all over the sleeping man's blanket, giving him wet nudges with his nose. But the oblivious man slept for so long that I was worried he might need medications, something to drink or eat, and of course the quintessential trip to the bathroom to empty his bladder. Looking after him wasn't going to be as plain sailing as I thought. It wasn't straightforward, was it? I wasn't exactly cut out to be a nurse, but I'd do my level best. I'm sure he wouldn't be here for very long, but I wasn't sure how long it would take him to heal from his injuries. I knew from experience that the body has a mind of its own. It heals in its own time, and everybody's body is different. I finally decide to wake up the man. I tap him gently on the shoulders. The next thing I know, he reacts so adversely, like you do when you're in a panic. He grabs me forcefully. His hands are around my throat, as if he's about to wring my neck. "Stop it! Stop it!" I scream out. "Stop it! What the hell are you doing?" I thrash out my arms at him to fight him off. My God, even in his weak state, he's very strong. I push the man away. "I was trying to wake you up, for goodness sake. I wasn't attacking you. That's what you thought, didn't you? My God, you really are living on a knife edge." The man releases his grip. He looks at me apologetically. "Sorry," he says bashfully. "I thought I was being pounced on by that dealer. In future, if you want to wake me up, it might be best if you shouted out my name. As you were saying, I'm a little on tender hooks. You do get a little edgy when you've been shot a few times and have come that close to death. Sorry I didn't introduce myself to you earlier on. I'm Dustin." "I'm Eve. It's nice to meet you, Dustin, although I wish it could be under better circumstances. You're one of the sickest-looking people I've ever met, and I don't say that lightly." "Remind me to visit you, Eve, when I want a confidence boost. You really know how to make a man feel good about himself." He glances down at his blanket, covered with dog toys. "What's going on here? It looks like I'm being decorated with a plethora of dog toys. I'm not exactly a Christmas tree, am I?" "Oh, it's Ernest," I grin. "I think he was trying to get you to play with him earlier on, by throwing his toys on you, for you to throw for him to fetch. But you were so zonked out. You were completely out for the count. You never felt any of his insistent nudges. And believe me, Ernest can be a pushy dog when he wants to be. When you didn't react to his nudges, let's just say he was more than a little disappointed. He actually whimpered and went back to his basket, looking very sorry for himself indeed." "Is he always like this, pushy?" "Always. It's the golden retriever in him, you see. He loves retrieving things. It's in their DNA. Most people think he's a Pyrenees mountain dog because he's so big, but he's not. Now, Dustin, can I get you anything to eat or drink? That's actually why I woke you up. You've been asleep for over 5 hours.
I was completely zonked. No, I'm fine, but I would appreciate some of my medications if I may. They're in the duffel bag, in my trunk. Of the truck, of course.
He says, reaching in his pocket for his car keys and throwing them for me to catch. The jingling movement excites Ernest, who's thinking that a game of fetch is clearly on the cards, and he lets out a very excited woof, thumping his tail on the floor eagerly, in hopeful anticipation. No, Ernest, this is not a game of fetch, I tell him, as to which his tail dives between his legs. His dark eyes display a sorrowful gaze. Ernest is very well acquainted with the word no. Both me and Justin burst out laughing at the disenchanted expression on Ernest's face. So Dustin redeems the situation by throwing some of the fluffy toys off the settee for Ernest to retrieve. Ernest lets out a happy woof and runs after his toys, his tail wagging enthusiastically. You better be careful there. You're making him too fond of you, I say.
Are you afraid that Ernest might like me more than you? Dustin teases, with a mischievous, amused twinkle in his eye. I'll have you know, dogs do have a tendency to fall head over heels in love with me.
As if I believe that. Ernest wouldn't do that to me. Never. Look, I don't need to be a nag. But while you're under my roof, Dustin, I need you to try at least to eat and drink something. I mean, how can you expect to get fit if you don't eat anything? I tell you what, I'll make you a smoothie, banana and yogurt, whisked together with some peanut butter. And do you think you can try and manage that? I'd be grateful if you could.
I'll give it a go, but I'm not terribly hungry.
I'm worried about you sleeping on this couch. Do you have the strength to walk further down the passageway, where I've made a bed up for you in that bedroom there? It'll be so much more comfortable for you than sleeping on a couch.
I'm happy where I am for the moment. Thank you, Eve. I think it's just too far to walk to that bedroom right now. I'm not strong enough yet, but I'll get there.
Fair enough. What about the bathroom facilities? It's not too far from the couch. It's through that door over there. Do you think you can manage that? I can give you a hand if you like to get there. Or otherwise I can give you a bucket for your ablutions. What would you like to do?
The bathroom will be absolutely fine. I can get there on my own. But thanks, Eve, for offering.
If you're sure, you know you can call me if you need my help. Just shout out, and Ernest will bark in response and wake me up, so I'll know you're calling me. In the days and weeks that followed, I'm so glad to say that slowly and surely Dustin begins to regain his health. In the very beginning, he almost lived on all my smoothies. Let's not kid. It was a long, daunting, harrowing process for his body to heal, as after becoming a dartboard for 6 bullet wounds in his chest, it would take a long while for his body to finally regenerate, but regenerate it did. So often it takes 1 bullet wound to kill, but often there are cases where several bullets miss a major artery or organ, and the patient pulls through. And for Dustin, this was his fortunate story. I believe it was simply not his time to go, as he had work to do on his earthly journey. I could see the rosy glimmer of pink colour finally returning to his cheeks, a sparkle in his eyes that was complemented by his great sense of humour. I don't think I've ever laughed so much in all my life as I did with Dustin. The man was a complete comic. We would play Scrabble and Monopoly together, listen to music, watch movies. I even read to him stories from books I was reading, and he would listen in earnest, sometimes falling fast asleep like a little child to the sound of my voice. He needed sleep. It aided his recovery. Furthermore, my enthusiastic golden retriever Ernest and my slumber lazy cat Muffin, they seemed to just love Dustin to pieces, as if he was now a permanent fixture and fitting in our cabin. For them he had earned their seal of approval, and let me tell you, Ernest was a judicious judge of character at the best of times. Then there was me, and I hasten to say that despite my very best efforts to want the stranger gone from my life, I began to secretly enjoy having him around, and he in turn seemed to appreciate my rather unconventional lifestyle, living off-grid, far from anything. It was almost as if my idiosyncratic way of life had struck a deep chord with him, resonating with his soul. Dustin had openly marvelled at the bald eagles, hanging out on the patio with both Muffin and Ernest on most days of the week.
"I've never seen anything like it in all my life. I could swear to you, those two bald eagles are emotionally attached to your pets. They've genuinely got a good friendship going on here. It's so enchanting to watch. If I was feeling stronger, I'd take hundreds of good photographs of this. I'm quite a dab hand with a camera, you know."
I think it's marvellous too. It's very special, you know. You see, idiosyncratic relationships with animals here in the remote wilderness are so special. Life can invite curious relationships to develop between animals that you'd never expect. Believe it or not, those eagles like having friends as much as we do, I say.
"You do surprise me, Eve. Saying that, I mean. I get the distinct impression you're very self-sufficient. I don't get the feeling that you have any friends, or want any either. You strike me as a lone wolf, which is strange because you've got such an engaging personality. You're hell of a fun to be around, a good laugh. But I think you're oblivious to your sparkle."
I flush. Thanks, that's very kind of you to say. I find myself feeling quite unusually flattered by the unexpected compliment. I'm not sure why I'm so solitary, I say. I'm not running away from anything, if that's what you think. A lot of people naturally think that when you're living the solo life, that's exactly what you're doing. But they couldn't be more wrong. In my case, that is. In truth, I think a lot of people who are running away from society do come here to the Alaskan wilderness to embrace the solitude, to escape the frenzied busyness and chaos of urban life. But that's not me.
"What are you then, Eve?"
he asks me, looking at me with a grin, the light of his blue eyes staring into mine with a glint of amusement. I'm not sure. I don't actually understand myself. I wish I did. Even I think I'm a conundrum. I guess I just like being close to nature. I have nothing against people, but I enjoy being in my own company. I enjoy the solitude and tranquility here. I find if I'm with people for too long, I begin to feel claustrophobic. It's stifling, almost as if I can't breathe. It can be overwhelming at times. I don't get how some people spend all their time on social media platforms. That would bore me rigid, to be connected to those sites all the time. I expect they wouldn't understand me, as much as I cannot understand them. But hey, there's nothing wrong with being eccentric. It's a free world, you know. Suffice to say, animals never ever make me feel suffocated like that. Maybe with humans you've always got to interact somehow, be socially engaging, effervescent to an extent, and sometimes you just don't feel like talking. Sometimes you don't feel like saying a damn thing, do you? But with animals you can be yourself. You can be quiet. You never have to stand on ceremony and make small, shallow, insincere talk just for the hell of it. I like to exist with nature like a tree in the woodgrove, without having to explain myself to anyone.
"Jason told me you were like that. He said he could never figure you out. But I think I get you, Eve."
Jason spent the whole year we were together, playing happy families, making a whole lot of fun of me. I think he was chuffed to bits having a sister to tease relentlessly. He loved every minute of ruffling my feathers and getting a reaction from me. Thank God he was only my stepbrother for a year. I don't think I could have hacked him for much more than that.
"He's a really good sort, Eve, really. He liked you a lot, believe it or not. He thought you were a very special person. He was only trying to lighten things up with you. He said you were so deadly serious about everything, and that you would always retreat into the shadows at all kinds of social engagements, not to be seen anywhere. He told me he pulled a sequel of jovial stunts on you, to bring you out of yourself, to get some kind of reaction from you. He loved getting a reaction from you. If you had remained indifferent and nonchalant, he'd have got bored stiff. But the impact of his tricks on you thrilled him so much. You gave him exactly what he wanted, with your indignant screams and protests, and you succeeded in egging him on to play more tricks on you. He couldn't help himself. Your stupendous reactions were classic.
Well, he got a reaction from me, didn't he? I wanted to get as far away from him as I possibly could. He drove me away from him, rather than made a friend out of me, least of all a sister.
Don't you want a family, Eve, to settle down one day, get married? Says Justin, looking at me seriously. You're a very attractive woman, with so much to bring to the table. Who makes the most legendary knocky, which you weren't kidding about either. I'd marry you for your knocky alone. And I'm not kidding. Then there are the paintings you do to sell tourists. They're absolutely stunning. I'm very impressed by the standard of your work. You're a natural talent with a unique style all of your own. I love the pictures you did of your animals and the bald eagles together on the patio. Those were excellent. Not to mention the mountain views and the flowery meadows that you've captured in your work. It's breathtaking. You do have a unique style.
Those pictures, I have to admit, are very popular. I thoroughly enjoy painting them. No, I haven't actually thought about marriage or kids. I enjoy living my life solo. And if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I'm all right with both. I have no hard or fast rules about my life. I just live one day at a time, and I watch what the tide brings in every day. Even living out here in the middle of nowhere, life can surprise you. Things happen, you know.
You're a funny one, Eve, laughs Dustin. How can you ever expect to get married one day and have children when you bury yourself away here in your cabin? If you have a precious piece of jewellery that you never ever wear, no one is ever going to know you own such a treasure, and not showing off your asset would be such a waste. A very big shame, if you ask me. I bet you've never joined a dating site a day in your life. Am I right or am I right? There are men out there that are missing out on a prize jewel, let me tell you.
You're right, I flush. I mean, I've never been on a dating site. Never been on Facebook, social media, Twitter, stuff like that. It really does not float my boat. It doesn't interest me in the slightest. If I was to communicate with someone, I'd far rather get a letter, any day of the week, over an SMS from someone on my telephone. Me and my mother are always writing to each other for that reason. I love receiving her letters. She's an excellent writer. There's nothing like a good letter, let me tell you that. Dustin's account. Nobody tells you what it's like to survive several gunshot wounds. Let's just say there were days when the pain was so insufferable, so unbearable, that I almost wish I hadn't survived. That's how bad it was. Nobody tells you how dreadful pain is. The shooting was not so painful itself. It was almost like a dull, burning ache that pierced through my body again and again, as if someone was punching me violently hard. I think my chest was filled with 6 bullets, but miraculously the shooter inadvertently avoided the main organs, and one bullet just grazed my heart. So in the grand scheme of things, I had a lucky, miraculous escape. It was the pain that was after the accident that was the most lamentable. Of course, I knew why I'd been shot. It goes with the territory of being an undercover officer. It's a risk you take in the job. But it was a risk I was prepared to take in order to bring down some heavy weights, well, the drug dealers that are involved in smuggling large quantities of drugs into Alaska. Let's just say these men are not good people. The kind of treacherous, devious types that are dictated by greed, money, wealth, power. And the value of human life means absolutely nothing to them. If you get on their wrong side and dare to betray them, they will kill you mercilessly, without even so much as batting an eyelid. And usually they will get away with their Machiavellian, insidious crimes. When you betray them, they're likely to make you suffer, chopping off hands and fingers, ears, private parts, even heads. They operate on a code of fear, so you won't dare double-cross them, so they cannot afford to have a chink in their armour, or seen to be soft in any way. They rule using blackmail and threats to dominate their people, and they succeed in their endeavours. I wouldn't mind betting some mysterious disappearance in Alaska could actually be attributed to artfully cunning men like these.
who get away with their crimes, as Alaska is so large. You could hide a deceased corpse here anywhere you like, and your crime would possibly remain clandestinely hidden for centuries. Let's just say my close call with death happened very fast. I was fast asleep in my apartment in Fairbanks, Alaska. Fairbanks is the North Star borough. It is the largest, coldest city in the interior of Alaska, known for its northern lights or aurora borealis, where the midnight sun, the sunsets and sunrises, last forever. Hence it is known as the Golden Heart of Alaska. I was asleep in a cosy warm bed at the time. The next thing I know is a man wearing a black ski mask over his face is hovering over my bed, firing into my chest several times. I believe he was second in command of the drug dealer I took down, furious that the big guy was now incarcerated and locked away in prison for a very long time. So he wanted to extract a lethal form of vengeance on me, to get his ultimate revenge. He would have liked to have cut out my tongue first and gouged out both of my eyes, but he knew his crime needed to be committed very quickly, so he wasted no time in ensuring that I was dead. But I wasn't. Needless to say, the police had tried to locate his whereabouts, as they knew who this perpetrator was that had attempted to kill me, who was now at large and could be anywhere, and it's not exactly difficult to hide in Alaska. He was a dangerous, evil man called Abe's Falconer, but he had slipped through their fingers like butter. By all accounts, while he was out there, my life was still in danger, as it was a dead cert that Abe's would stop at nothing to finish what he'd started, and this time he would make absolutely sure that my body became a pincushion of bullets and that I was definitely dead. I imagine he was cursing himself for not doing a better job, and was possibly amazed I had survived the shooting. In truth, no one was more flabbergasted than myself. I am surprised my body pulled through against all the odds. It is remarkably resilient, that's all I can say. I think I was conscious for about 2 minutes after the shooting. Then I completely blacked out and faded into oblivion. I remember nothing after that, other than waking up in a hospital bed, being welcomed back to the world by a doctor who told me it had been touch and go for a while, but a team of skilled surgeons in accident and emergency had successfully brought me back from the very brink of death. I had no near-death experiences to recount, and if I did, they're clouded in amnesia, as I have no recollection of any of it. Unbeknown to the shooter, Jason was staying in my apartment that night, sleeping on the couch, and so his presence in my home saved my life, as I was able to receive the medical attention I needed forthwith. I was a very fortunate man, and was fully aware of this, as if Jason had not been there, I would not have been conscious to call for help, so I would almost certainly have not survived my injuries. The first time I met Eve, I was in an intolerable amount of insufferable pain that was so dreadful it's impossible to describe. It was nothing short of a miracle that I happened to notice the little ambiguous sign sticking out from a tree, where there was a narrow path which read, "The Alaskan Queen." To date I still marvel that I found the place at all. It was so inconspicuously buried behind all those trees. I was expecting Eve to be a heavyweight woman, built like a tank engine, the hardened, robust, well-weathered outdoor type, with short cropped hair and a very masculine physique. But she was as pretty as a picture, and although athletic and strong, she was slight, slender and feminine, which you wouldn't expect from a woman living on her own in the Alaskan wilderness. It was like finding a single flower in a mountainous valley. Eve had fair skin, green eyes, long silky dark hair that fell beyond her shoulders. It was amazing how oblivious she was in regards to her own attractiveness. I like women like that, who have no idea how pretty they actually are. That in itself I find beguilingly attractive. I could tell she wasn't that enamoured to have me inconveniently flung into her charge, as she thoroughly enjoyed living on her own, and she loved the solo lifestyle. My serendipitous arrival in her life like an unwanted parcel was possibly the last thing she wanted. I knew she'd only agreed to be saddled with me, as she was being paid for the privilege, but I wouldn't have had it any other way. It was a major job to look after the likes of me, in my weak, pathetic state. It was so frustrating for an athletic person like myself,
To be reduced to such a weakling, confined to the couch, with about as much energy as a sloth. It didn't help that my medications made me perpetually sleepy. Let's just say, for a man used to living an active lifestyle, being forced to lie back all day and take it easy was a manner of incarceration for me. A hypothetical prison sentence, you could say. But the loveliness of Eve and her warm, engaging personality made it all the more bearable for me. I would say her warm, winsome sense of humour helped me rise above some of the pain that I was experiencing. I could see why Eve loved living in the middle of nowhere, for in the desolate isolation there was so much beauty to be found, an abundance of it, especially in the natural wildlife that often congregated near the cabin in the early mornings and late evenings. I'd seen grizzly bears on her property, wandering around, one with 3 cubs, even looking at us through the window. It would make us laugh. Those bears could be a hell of a noisy, and believe me, you always heard them coming. There'd been moose on the property. One evening a mother grey wolf and her younglings hung around on the patio all evening. We watched her licking her little younglings clean. She was so tender towards them, an amazing attentive mother. We watched the little cubs playing with each other, and although they could see us watching them, they were unfazed, undaunted. There were lots of visitors to Eve's property that were so comfortable with her cabin, as they were to the surrounding landscape, almost as if it was just another tree. Eve would stand in the living room painting pictures from photographs she'd taken in nature on an easel. She would recreate her impression of the photograph on the canvas, which she would later sell to a gallery in Anchorage for the benefits of tourists visiting the area, delighting in taking a piece of Alaska back home with them. I must admit her artwork was inspirational. I loved watching her paint. She made it look so terribly easy, and she was a naturally neat painter, which was why she could paint in her living room without splattering paint on her furniture. I had begun to thoroughly enjoy being in her company, and I was beginning to develop feelings for her, which was not what I was expecting to happen. I hasten to say that the discerning Jason predicted as much. "I wouldn't mind betting you'll fall head over heels in love with my stepsister, Dustin. You know, the injured soldier falling for the nurse? It happens all the time. Make sure I'm best man at your wedding, will you?" I thought he'd been joking. Now, I wasn't so sure. Had he intentionally been playing matchmaker with us, and cunningly brought us together? In truth, I was beginning to see that we had so much in common, and could already envisage a life with Eve. Or more to the point, I couldn't imagine a life without her in it. It would be like a monochromatic painting without any colour. Something big would be missing from my life. Let's just say it is not easy to find love in Alaska. Believe me, I know. For so long I'd been struggling to find the right woman, and now I'd met my ideal match, under the roof of a remote cabin in the middle of nowhere. This was not the place I would have expected to find love. But that's love for you, isn't it? Its seed germinates when you least expect it to. The trouble was, Eve gave me the distinct impression that she wasn't interested in a relationship of any kind, and I wasn't even sure if she actually liked me in that way. As if she liked me, surely she'd give me a signal in this regard. I didn't want to tell her how I felt, as I didn't want to lose the friendship we had formed together. It was too precious for me for that. I decided that if anything were to happen between us, I'd leave the ball entirely in her court. It was easier that way, rather than making a complete fool of myself and blowing up our friendship. My long road to recovery was a tumultuous journey, like driving your truck down the most hazardous road that leaves you wondering if you're going to make it through alive, with all those potholes, sheer crevices, black ice. So no, it wasn't easy. I'd gone through nauseous bouts of terrible pain that were so gruesome I was sometimes forced to throw up the contents of my stomach. A weird parallel, I know, but our bodies are enigmatic, to say the least. But slowly and surely, I was gradually getting stronger and stronger. I was beginning to exercise around the house, but had not ventured outdoors yet. I think I had a misguided, warped perception that I was stronger than I actually was. One day when Eve went shopping into Anchorage for supplies with the ever-faithful Ernest by her side, who always accompanied her on her road trips, it was only me and Muffin in the house, and by the looks of Muffin, he wasn't exactly going to be the most riveting company for me. The lackadaisical grey and white cat had sagaciously retreated onto the couch, parking himself under the window pane for the entire afternoon. As bright shafts of warm sunlight filtered onto the couch, Muffin greedily snatched and hoovered up the sunshine all to himself, snuggling in the warm spot. I didn't know the meaning of laziness until I met Muffin, but to be fair, when he received a visit from those bald eagles, he bounced out of his lethargy and would behave like a playful kitten towards the two magnificent birds of prey. With a wingspan of 7.5 feet, and I'm not kidding either, Muffin looks at me through half-shut eyes, and I know he'll be drifting off to La La Land very, very soon. It was such an intriguingly beautiful summer's day, and Alaska in summer is magnificent, and the prepossessing views around the cabin were totally enchanting. I suddenly felt this overwhelming desire to get out there, as being cooped up indoors like a bird in a cage meant I was hankering to get out into the fresh air, and my spirit had become restless as I waited impatiently for my body to heal. The trouble was my body didn't accommodate my disquiet, and was stubbornly hell-bent on healing at its own very slow pace. I was feeling much stronger, eating better. I'd even put on some weight, which was a good thing, as over the past few weeks I had lost about 58 pounds, and my clothes had been hanging off me like a large tent. Eve had assured me that my skin was no longer grey, like it had been when I first arrived on her property. "I never knew I'd make such a good nurse," she joked, "but look at you. Your skin is glowing. When you first moved in, you were so grey. It's being in such an idyllic environment, watching all the fabulous sunsets in the evening from the porch, or the animals visiting the meadow. It's doing you the world of good. Nature is the best healer, you know. There are moments you look so washed out, so peaky, so pallid, that I did wonder then whether I'd wake up one morning to find you dead." "You didn't," I gasped. "Yes, I did. You had your moments, you know," she admits. "Moments when you look pretty grim. But you're looking great. Now you must take it easy. A few steps at a time. Don't you dare overdo it. You're not as strong as you look, you know. Appearances can be deceptive. Just because you think you're better doesn't actually mean you are. I remember when I was a kid, I recovered from a bout of pneumonia. I insisted I was better, and arrived at school excited to be back with all my friends again. But within 20 minutes I had fainted and collapsed. I was so weak. I had underestimated my strength, lied to my parents by how well I actually was. Be careful not to let that happen to you. I can see you're champing at the bit to get out into nature, but you need to take it one step at a time." I knew that I'd only ever attempt going out of doors to explore when Eve was safely out of the way. So I waited for the perfect opportunity when she left for Anchorage that morning for her monthly shop. I knew if Eve was here, she would stop me from taking a walk outside. She would insist that I wasn't fit enough. I felt sure I could manage a walk. I was feeling great. It was a beautiful, tranquil day, kissed by a nostalgic serenity. The long summer days in Alaska can be dreamily romantic, with temperatures warm and pleasant, sometimes reaching 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So armed with a rifle, I left the whimsical wooden cabin behind me that was made out of ancient wooden beams. I ambled towards the large, welcoming congregation of quaking aspen, yellow polar and spruce trees that were rustling their velvety green boughs mischievously in a gentle, cool breeze. In the furthest distance, basking under the horizon, like a couple of towering but enormous hunchbacked whales, where the billowing poised silhouettes of the mountains gallantly carpeted in a dreamy bushy glaze of contrasting shades of green. The jutting tips of their rugged contours were magnanimously sprinkled with an icing sugar like snow. The cobalt blue sky was bespeckled with white candy floss clouds, while birds with outstretched wings soared above me. The field surrounding the cabin on every side was filled with knee-high grass and thousands of bright pink flowers that littered the landscape with their beguiling bright colours. It felt so marvellously good to be out in nature again, to feel the cool breeze blowing against my face and the warm sun beating down upon my shoulders. I soaked happily in its warmth. The grass tickled my knees as I ambled towards the trees. Before long I was walking happily through the woods, where I could see twinkling glimpses of the blue sky, playfully peering at me through the open canopy, like a naughty, mischievous child spying on its parents.
It was so pretty in the forest, with the floor carpeted with ferns and rather attractive shade-loving flowers. The forest was peppered in the shade of a soft ethereal light that dappled the viridescent scenery in differing tones of light. I was beginning to heave and breathe heavily. My legs were aching, and I was panting like an unfit dog. Only moments before I was feeling so great, but suddenly my chest was seized with painful aching spasms that reminded me of when I was first shot. But this was so much worse. The throbbing, insufferable pain surged through my bloodstream like a hostile, uninvited intruder, and began to shoot through me like shooting stars going off in the heavens all at once. I felt as if I was going to lose my balance and keel over, so I quickly reached out towards a tree to steady myself, to balance myself up against it. I'm so overwhelmed by exhaustion. I feel out of breath, dizzy, disorientated. So I sink to the ground, clutching my chest tightly. I grimace in pain, my body shuddering under its lamentable, objectionable offence. I'm not sure exactly what happened after that. Maybe I passed out from the punishing pain. I don't know. But a while later I'm feeling something poking me. I know it's Eve, trying to wake me up in the cabin, having returned from Anchorage from doing her shopping. I know she means well, but my golly, I want to continue sleeping. I don't want to wake up. Can't a man be left to sleep in peace, for goodness sake? I keep my eyes tightly closed, clutching on to sleep for dear life, like a reluctant child who begrudgingly won't let go of its filthy teddy bear that his mother wants to wash for him. The nudging continues. I groan. Eve, I'm not hungry. Leave me alone, I mumble. But my words don't exactly come out like that. I sound like I'm groaning. Ah! I open my eyes to see two creatures standing over me, with very concerned, bewildered looks on their faces. I close my eyes tightly again. The poking continues. This time I open my eyes fully. I find myself staring into these bright brown eyes, inches away from my own. At first I'm convinced that this is a rather bizarre dream I'm having. This can't be happening to me. Where am I? And more to the point, what is this strange thing staring at me that looks so remarkably human? I rise up out of my slumber and sit up with a start, trying to take everything in, trying to literally become acclimatized to my bearings. I'm in the forest, sitting under a tree, with two idiosyncratic creatures squatting on their hefty legs to get down to my level, with one hand on my leg. The other has a hand on the back of my forehead, as if trying to gauge my temperature. Both the creatures are wearing profound, assiduous expressions on their faces that betray a level of steadfast concern. They are worried about me. It's in this moment I realise what they are. They're Bigfoots. I knew these creatures existed because a good friend of mine was fishing on a boat in an Alaskan lake once with a few of his mates. He claimed he had the strange sense that he was being watched. Everyone on that boat felt it, and that was when they witnessed this tall creature of about 8 foot tall, covered in hair with a human-like face, staring at them. The creature was benevolent, non-aggressive, but stared at them, and they swore that in front of their eyes he vanished like a ghost. It was the weirdest thing that had ever happened to my friend. In the end, everyone concluded he must have slipped into a portal or something. I had been envious of my friend's encounter, but now I'm close up and personal myself with two Bigfoots that are obviously trying to help me out, and I don't exactly know how to react. I mean, how do you react when something so outlandish happens to you like this? How would you feel if a Tyrannosaurus Rex is sniffing in your face and you wake up to this? I study the creatures rather curiously, especially the one that has risen up on his feet, while one remains squatted on her legs, looking at me intently. She's talking to the other creature in a language I don't understand. I know they're discussing me. Omo inata abo omalasin. Oh, mina, omilo biana lamano mina. The Bigfoot that is standing up is all male. I'd say he's about 9 foot tall, easily over 800 pounds, possibly more. He's built like a robust army tank, with a muscular brawn that is downright impressive, He'd probably make the strongest man in the world look like a puny wimp, as he's easily the equivalent of 5 strong men put together in just one body. I noticed that there were very little primate influences to his appearance, with the exception of the long flowing dark hair that covered their bodies, the pyramid-shaped heads and overlong arms, but other than that, they were incredibly human. They didn't smell foul either. There was no ugly smells around them, or a demoniacal look in their faces. On the contrary, both creatures were ruggedly good-looking, with high cheekbones, deep-set eyes the colour of Eva's golden retriever dog, and very square jawlines. The female Bigfoot is the one that seems to be mothering me. She's stroking my face so tenderly. She reaches out a large hand to mine, and I stagger to my feet as I take hers in mine. I realise the creatures are going to help me get back safely to the cabin, and I'm so grateful, because without their help, I'm not going to make it on my own. The pain is excruciating. My legs are buckling beneath my feet. I hold on to the Bigfoot for dear life, terrified of losing my balance. The 2 creatures engage in conversation together. Omaki alaka iupo, amano dukonina pa.
Minaba, imama shomako, omo.
And once they've reached a decision, the female Bigfoot carries me in her arms, and both creatures deliver me to my porch. Well, rather Eva's porch, and the female places me on the chair there. Thank you very much, I say. They nod at me very graciously, and then I watch them glide away, and they move like the wind, almost as if they're floating. I knew Eve was back before I even saw the truck, as I could hear Ernest barking excitedly. I'm quite certain he'd seen the Bigfoots himself. Eve opens the door to the patio, and he comes tearing out, sniffing me all over, wagging his tail excitedly. He can definitely smell the Bigfoots on me. Where the hell have you been? I've been looking for you everywhere. I didn't know where you'd got to. I couldn't find you anywhere in the cabin. You seem to have disappeared into thin air. To my amazement, I could see tears in Eve's eyes. I was worried sick about you. I thought something dreadful had happened. I thought... You thought what? I asked her gently. I thought that evil man had finally found you, had taken you away and... The next thing I know, Eve is sobbing. I'm holding her in my arms, kissing the top of her head gently.
I'm all right, Eve. I had a bit of adventure, that's all. But you're right. I wasn't fit enough to go exploring, so I slipped up.
You mean you went out after I left Anchorage all on your own, without my help? How could you do that? Are you crazy? I nodded. You are crazy then. I told you that you needed to be careful, but I should have guessed you wouldn't listen to me. You can be quite stubborn when you want to be.
Would you believe it? I collapsed when I got into the wood grove.
You went all the way into the woods, says Eve, looking aghast, wiping away the tears from her face. Are you kidding me? Do you realise how treacherous it is in the wood grove, all those jutting rocks, the precipitous terrain? What on earth were you thinking? You know you're not fit.
I wasn't thinking. I collapsed. I think I fell asleep there.
You're joking, are you?
No, I'm not. I was awoken by 2 benevolent Bigfoot, with very kind eyes. They were very good to me. They brought me back to the cabin. I couldn't have made it back on my own.
2 Bigfoots, says Eve, looking stunned. You know, it's a funny thing, but I always felt I was being looked after out here in the wilderness, as if someone had my back. And I think I know who they are now. You know, Bigfoot aren't just known as the king of the forest for nothing. But I feel jealous you had such a one-on-one encounter with them. But I'm so relieved you're all right. In that moment, I knew Eve cared for me. She was genuinely upset that some harm may have happened to me. So the words came tumbling out like bullets from a revolver. I pressed the trigger, and it was too late. I'd said it.
Eve, I'm in love with you. I think I've had feelings from you from the moment I ate your potato gnocchi that you dished up.
She stares at me for a moment, her eyes widening. Then a tear spills down her cheek.
Oh, God, I think I haven't blown it.
I told you that potato gnocchi was legendary. Didn't I tell you that?
You're not kidding. There must be a love potion attached to it. It's a hell of a dangerous potato gnocchi, if you ask me, for an unsuspecting man. Eve laughs. I think so too. When I thought something had happened to you, I thought my insides had been ripped apart. The idea of being without you suddenly seemed nonsensical. It's like you've grown on me. At first you were an annoying inconvenience that benefited my bank account favourably. And now you're an inconvenience I don't actually want to be without. I think even Ernest and Muffin would agree with me there. Ernest lets out a couple of approving woofs, as if in absolute agreement. Woof, woof, woof. I then get down on my knees. I pull out a ring pull from the can of beer I'd opened, and I put it on Eve's finger. Eve, will you marry me? Yes, 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 I will, she cries out in delight. To cut a long story short, Eve and I finally tied the knot. I did replace the ring pull from the beer for a rather attractive ring that Eve selected in Anchorage for herself. I'm pleased to say that Eve's brother, or stepbrother if you like, Jason, was the best man at our wedding, while Ernest wore a black tie for the ceremony, and Muffin insisted on remaining at home, having found another warm spot on the couch that had grabbed his attention. The relationship with Eve's stepbrother grew in leaps and bounds, and they now unequivocally consider each other brother and sister, and it's common for Jason to spend weekends with us. I am now living in the remote country cabin with Eve. I love it here, although sometimes my work does take me away from her, for weeks at a time, but that is never a problem for us. We have found each other, and that is all that really matters. I'm glad to say the man who tried to kill me was caught and incarcerated, so now he's safely behind bars. After Eve and I had our first baby, a little girl we chose to call Serafina, as the name has angelic connotations, so it seemed appropriate. When we brought Serafina back from the hospital, we found the table on our outside patio, filled with gifts, a couple of really magnificent river stones, the likes of such I've never seen before, a bird's nest with a little egg inside it, a petrified piece of driftwood that is a spectacular piece on our coffee table, and a couple of freshly caught fish. Let's just say we knew at once they were gifts from the Bigfoot, congratulating us on our new addition to the family. So we know they're watching out for us. So there you are. That's my story.
Well, hello there. I hope you enjoyed the Omnibus edition. We've got many more coming our way for you to listen to. Sending you love wherever you are in the world, in North America, Canada, Kenya, wherever you may be. I send you lots and lots of love. Thank you for listening to my Omnibus, and I really do hope you enjoyed it, because that's the whole idea about it, is to give you some interesting stories to listen to. So until next time, goodbye and good night.